A happy hour Friday edition of the Sports Bash starts right now. What's going on, my friends? I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Jennings producing today's show. You out there, happy Friday. Oh, we made it. We made it. We made it. Yes, indeed. The weekend is here. I need this weekend. You know why? Because the NFL draft is next week, and we are knee-deep in it. I was watching, I don't even want to say what I was watching last night. But there's a scene in the movie, which will give away what I was watching, but I didn't really watch it last night, so I'm just saying this. There's a scene in the movie, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, when they're playing the card game, BS, bull blank. And this is the week of the BS. It's all coming out now. Jalen, I see you're watching the show live like Jalen is on YouTube. It says, happy Friday, Mike. Ann Rappaport just tweeted, the Cowboys won't move up from 10 for anyone in the draft, including Pitts. This warms my heart. Pitts should be long gone before 10. I almost feel like that means they're definitively going to do that. This is the week where if you're a reporter, you are being used and abused. This is the worst week to be a reporter on the NFL draft. They are finding people, front offices are, they are finding and feeding you information that is complete BS, but they're telling you, hey, I got a lead for you. I've got a big story for you. You're going to be the guy who gets the breaking news on this. We're really interested in trading up. Go ahead and put that out there. You're getting bad information, but they're telling you the information. And your job as the reporter is to report the information that you're given. So you're kind of put in a no-win situation. So this is the BS week. If we can come together on one thing, it's that we're going to hear a bunch of craziness going on. We'll break it all down for you, though. What's BS? What's not? What do we believe? What don't we believe? There's one thing about the draft that I love. It's the constant speculation that changes every day. One of the reasons why I love the draft is because everything does change, because especially at the top of the draft, there's a reason why it changes every day. The teams at the top of the draft are typically bad football teams, and they need so many things. If you're Jacksonville, yes, you need a quarterback. But guess what? If they took a quarterback the year before, there would be 10 different things that they need. And the team behind them, the New York Jets, they don't just need a quarterback. They need a lot of things. But the quarterback is such an important position that they take that position. The San Francisco 49ers, and I want to bring these guys up because I find them to be very interesting. The top of the draft is meant for bad football teams. The San Francisco 49ers, and I want to see if people agree with me on this. Are they doing themselves a disservice by picking number 3 and not taking the best player available? They were in a situation where they went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Last year, they went 6-10, due in part because they had a lot of injuries. They had a lot of problems with injuries, and it really just derailed their season. By the way, one of the injuries that occurred happened to be from the quarterback. Thank you very much. Well, we just figured something out there. All right. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. All right. So I apologize for that. We had a little bit of a technical issue there that was all my fault. You can blame me for that. So those of you who have been watching the live video were listening. You could hear me over there. Apparently on the radio, there was a little bit of a problem that you could not get me, but I think you got me now, and we should be all right. All right, here we go. So the San Francisco 49ers are drafting in the number 3 spot. Are they doing themselves a disservice by being in the number 3 spot and taking a quarterback there? Are they doing the rest of the roster a disservice? And what do I mean by that? This is the team that went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, which tells you what? They were good enough with the roster that they had to get to the Super Bowl. Did they lose that Super Bowl because the roster wasn't good enough? Are they a player away? Or is the quarterback not good enough? I think it's a fair question. But you were in the Super Bowl. You went 6-10 last year. Why? I think it's a fair thing to say. The injuries crippled that team last year. They had injuries all over the place. One of the injuries to that team occurred to the quarterback of that team. There was an injury to the quarterback of that team last year that crippled that football team. I don't want to say it crippled the football team, but it was part of the reason why the 49ers stunk last year is their quarterback got hurt. So if you're the number 3 pick and you're the San Francisco 49ers, are you doing yourself a disservice by drafting a quarterback that may or may not be the right player? If you have the number 3 pick in the draft, are you doing yourself a disservice by not taking the best player available when you were already in the Super Bowl and could have just been one player short? Was that one player Mac Jones or Justin Fields? It's a really tough question. They think it is, apparently. But we're talking about the BS zone. This is the week of the BS. This is when all the BS will start coming out. Would it be entirely nuts for the San Francisco 49ers to be blowing a smokescreen this whole time, trade up to number 3, and not take a quarterback? I don't think so. But is the quarterback what they absolutely positively need? Kind of an interesting thought when you think about all the BS that we're going to start hearing. If I'm the San Francisco 49ers, there's no way I would have gave up to what I gave up to trade up to number 3 in this year's draft. No stinking way. I had a Super Bowl roster, and I don't think it was a Mac Jones or Justin Fields away from getting back to the Super Bowl. Now, Adam Kaplan said something yesterday on the show that maybe they're thinking. Maybe this is what they have in mind when they're thinking about the trade that they made. But I'll tell you what, it takes a very patient and poised front office to make the move that they did if Adam Kaplan is right here.
The draft is not about this season. It's not like, okay, we're going to draft just for this year's roster and then cut the whole team. No, folks, it's the future. Free agency, as general managers have told me over the years, it's about right now and maybe a year after. The draft is down the line, and hopefully you get some help out of it this year, but it's really about down the line.
Down the line. And that's what this week, when you're thinking about the BS meter, that comment right there is something we all need to think about. The draft isn't for this year. It's for down the line. It's for, hey, if you're the San Francisco 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo maybe starts this year. Maybe he gets us back to a Super Bowl. I don't know. But the player that I take at number 3, I like so much that I traded up to get there for one reason. So that because I have a roster that I feel can continuously get back to the playoffs and make a Super Bowl push. If you're the Philadelphia Eagles, and quite frankly, any team in the top 15, are you drafting for this year in mind, or are you drafting long-term? Of course, you're always drafting with long-term in mind. But the player that you take, the Philadelphia Eagles, and most of these teams in the top 12, top 15, they need that player to start immediately and make an impact. You need to show, hey, there's very few teams. San Francisco is one of them. San Francisco, it's interesting because can you put Philadelphia? San Francisco went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Are they a dumpster fire all of a sudden? Did they go to the Super Bowl and turn into a dumpster fire? Look what Philadelphia did. They won the Super Bowl, and 3 years later, they won 4 games. So I feel the parallels between Philadelphia and San Francisco are interesting to bring up here. Because Philadelphia wins a Super Bowl in 17, 18, they make the playoffs, 19, they make the playoffs, 20, they're a dumpster fire. San Francisco was a dumpster fire for years, finally got back on track, went to the Super Bowl. The very next season, they're a dumpster fire. They were a dumpster fire last year for the most part. They won 6 games, but both teams had expectations last year. Philadelphia had a 10-win over-under from Vegas. The odds in Vegas at the start of the season for Philadelphia Over-under wins was 10. San Francisco went to the Super Bowl the year before. So which one is more likely, the team with the number 3 pick in the draft or the team with the number 12 pick in the draft? Is San Francisco a one-year Super Bowl wonder and then they fall apart so they have to go up and get a quarterback? Look at Philadelphia. They won a Super Bowl, and 3 years later, they have a new quarterback. The moral of this story, my friends, is injuries in the NFL are real. They can cripple a team, and they can cripple a season. And the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers are just one example. There's another example that resides right inside your division. The Dallas Cowboys were an injury disaster last year. The roster was just absolutely not as bad as San Francisco and Philadelphia, but pretty much on par. I think San Francisco was number 1 in the league with injuries. I think Philadelphia was number 2 in the league in injuries. And I believe Dallas was in the top 5 of most injured teams, games lost last year due to injury, and impactful players. If Dallas doesn't lose Dak Prescott, I don't care who else on that team got hurt. They would have won the division. Now all these teams are picking in the top 12. Philly was in the top 6. They were at 6. They moved back to 12. And you would have said, these 3 teams are picking in the top 10. So what Adam said is interesting. It was a thought that I said I want to open up the show with is, keep in mind, when you're hearing all the BS, when all the crazy rumors are starting to fly out there, keep that comment in mind, that the draft isn't just about this year. It's about long term. So when a team takes a guy, where do they think they are as a franchise? And that's why I find it interesting with Philly, with Dallas, and San Francisco. And to another extent, you got a team like Miami, who I think feels like they're turning the corner. Of the teams in the top half of the draft, the bottom half of the draft, I guess I should say, you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. These teams, San Francisco thinks they're a playoff team. They're drafting 3rd. Miami thinks they're a playoff team. They're drafting 6th. Dallas thinks they're a playoff team. They're drafting 10th. New York is right there. They're not a playoff team yet, but I think they think they're a playoff team now. They're drafting 11. So are they drafting with this year in mind to try to make the playoffs, or are they drafting, like, let's be honest, Jacksonville, they're probably, now they're getting Trevor Lawrence. They're in a whole different spot. But if Trevor Lawrence isn't on the board, they're taking a quarterback anyway, but most likely Jacksonville doesn't think they're a playoff team. They can have the thought of, this pick's not for now, it's for down the road. Same thing with most of the teams. The Jets at 2, Atlanta at 4, Cincinnati certainly at 5. They're in a different boat than the San Franciscos of the world. But the thing that I'm trying to come and figure out is what side does Philadelphia fit in on? Are they the team that feels like, hey, we were in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, we had a lot of injuries, and we feel like if we're healthy, we're right there. Not right there, but that we can get a player and play, and we can. In other words, this goes back to the conversation we had with Adam yesterday. If you draft an offensive lineman, your thought process is kind of like, this is a for down the road pick. Because I don't know that an offensive lineman comes right in and starts on this team this year. If you draft Rashawn Slater or, Ali Vera Tucker, are they starting at guard right off the bat? Are they bumping Brandon Brooks? No. Are they bumping Isaac Seumalo? Probably not. So if you draft an offensive lineman, you're really making a draft pick for down the line. You're not making a draft pick with an impact on 2021 unless somebody gets hurt. And that's where I find this draft to be kind of interesting with Philly. And I think it's going to give us a little insight on what they think they are. Do they think that they are a team that was crippled by injuries, or do they think they're a bad football team? If they think they were a team that was crippled by injuries, they take an offensive lineman. If they think they're a bad football team and have a lot of holes to fill, and we got to start filling them, that's when they probably take the corner. I think the mindset of Howie Roseman will be interesting. Will he add more picks? You know how many times last night I was asked, what are the Eagles going to do? It's the biggest thing ever right now. Everybody wants to know. And, of course, nobody has the answer. But my answer could change depending on what moment of the day you get me. Hey, what are they going to do? I think they're going to trade back and take an offensive lineman and get more picks. Why? Because I think they feel that this team can compete, but they want to add more picks because they understand this is an aging football team. Lane Johnson's getting older. Brandon Brooks is getting older. Jason Kelsey is getting older. Fletcher Cox is getting older. Brandon Graham is getting older. Rodney McLeod is coming off 2 major knee injuries. Darius Slay is hitting 30. There's a bunch of guys I just gave you right there that are pretty key members of this team. But I think the Eagles are trying to serve 2 masters. That is the conclusion that I've come up with on the BS meter. I don't think the Eagles think they're a bad football team. I don't think the Eagles think they're a Super Bowl contender. I think they feel that this draft class, they have some aging players that they need to draft for the future. In other words, you know what? I'm going to have to find a right tackle for probably 2 years down the line, 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Defensive tackle, we still got to start getting younger at that spot. Defensive end, got to start getting younger at that spot. Cornerback, we've got to get younger at that spot, and we've got to get more talent. They have 11 picks. I think the message with 12, if they stay at 12, I say this at 2:17 on a Friday. I'll try again at 3:17. I might have a different thought. I say at 12, if they stay, they take a corner. If they move back, they take an offensive lineman. If they move up, it's because there's a corner that they're targeting, whether it be Patrick Surtain, and they want to make sure they get him. Because I don't think they think if they sit at 12, they're going to get him at 12. And the only other scenario that comes to my mind right now is one of the players, and I don't know who it is, they have high on their board, and he starts to fall. And I say he falls, and he's in the 7, 8, 9 range. And which team will take that extra 3rd-round pick that the Eagles have? I feel like that extra 3rd-round pick that they got from the Colts in the Wentz trade, that's their trade chip. That's their call. Hey, we like Devonta Smith. He's there at 9. We're going to make the move. Hey, we like Jalen Waddle. He's there at 8. We didn't think he'd be there at 8. We're going to call and make the move. Hey, we want Patrick Surtain. He's on the board at 9. We know Dallas picks at 10. We want him. We're going to make the move. Outside of that, I think they stay at 12 and take J.C. Horn. And outside of that, I think they say, if we get a call and somebody wants this pick, we'll move back and we'll take Rashawn Slater. That's where I'm at right now. All right, Sports Bash Live on a Friday. We're just cranking it up. Brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan, now open. Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Online, MattBlattNissan.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash, Friday edition. Sal Pal Antonio, 3 o'clock. Paul Hudrick, inside the Sixers. Andrew DiCecco answers your draft questions. Football at 4. Bob Wankel on the Phillies weekend. Happy Hour Friday with the PT. And Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports. We're jam-packed. We're busy. But we are answering all of your questions, as many as we can fit in. 609-403-0973. Mike, draft the best player available. They have holes all over. I want Parsons, future captain of your defense. You know what? I think best player available is interesting because they happen to be at the positions you need the most. So they lucked out there. Because if the best player available is an offensive lineman, I don't know that that's their biggest hole. I think that's their biggest hole down the road. But in 2021, it's not their biggest hole. That goes back to Adam's comment. We're back on that coming up. Sal Pal, 3 o'clock. Don't go away. It's Happy Hour Friday. Crank one open for me, everybody. Cranky, cranky. All right, a Friday edition of the Sports Bash, and you're watching live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you're listening to the show, you'll take your text messages, of course, on the radio at 609-403-0973. And if you're watching the show, you can always leave your comment in the chat section. Beth James is watching on YouTube. Hey, Beth. She says, hey, Mike. Do you think Kellen Mond or Davis Mills could be options in the draft late rounds? Also, the one I would love as a late pick in the 6th round, Fisher. Have the Eagles spoken to him? I haven't seen anything on that, but Kellen Mond, Davis Mills, I definitely think are in the mix there. Look, I said a couple of days ago that, and Patty Fisher's the Northwestern kid. I have not heard whether the Eagles have talked to him or not, but the kid that I keep, if you're going to take a quarterback in this draft, and I think the Eagles have to and will, would be Kyle Trask. And when he's available, might be the 3rd round. Do they want to invest a quarterback in the 3rd round? Especially if they trade one of their 3rd round picks. If they don't go with Kyle Trask, then I think you go to that next group of names. You just mentioned 2 of them, Munn, Mills. I think Fisher would be later than those 2 guys. I definitely think, look, they have multiple, I think, 5th and 6th and 7th. I think they have multiple picks in all 3 of those rounds. Expect a quarterback in the later rounds. They have to. They only have 2 on the roster. Someone's got to be the quote-unquote camp arm, and someone's got to be that 3rd-string guy. So you definitely will see a quarterback drafted in this draft, whether you like that or not, anybody, because you might say that's a wasted draft pick. You have so many holes. Well, you only have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. They definitely are going to leave with another quarterback in this roster. Let's see. Jalen is watching on YouTube. Offensive line is a disaster, in my opinion, unless it's a trade back. You're talking about, I believe, if they draft an offensive line at 12. I don't think it's a disaster. It's just a not exciting pick. When you're a bad football team and you draft a offensive lineman, it's not exciting, especially if you're a bad football team because, you don't have a playmaker. The Eagles didn't have a playmaker last year. The question inside that building is why? Why did the Eagles have no playmaking ability? You have to ask a couple of layers of questions there. Why didn't they have a playmaker? Well, was it because their playmakers stink? Was it because the offense stunk? Was it because the talent on the team wasn't used correctly? I think Howie Roseman gave you a little insight on Wednesday when they had their little powwow as to how they think about that very question. Think about this. Listen to what he said here.
Yeah, we learned a lot about the process last year. Obviously unique the first time that we're doing all of these on Zoom, and there are a lot of lessons learned. And I think where we are right now is just excited about the teamwork that we had throughout this process with the coaches, with the scouts, with our front office, and move for there to make sure that we have a tremendous draft this year. The book hasn't been written on last year's draft either. So excited for those guys to get with Coach and his staff.
Book not written on those guys. Excited for them to get with Coach and his staff. Translation, we think we had playmakers. We didn't think Coach and his staff last year got the most out of those playmakers. So they have guys, and I would contend that they feel the same way about maybe J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Hey, we got a guy. You didn't use him very well. We had a guy. We gave you a guy. Look at all these wide receivers. They all performed pretty well. We gave you a wide receiver. He didn't perform well. Is that on JJ, or are they blaming Doug Peterson for that? Does the front office, and of course the front office, I can't imagine the front office is sitting there saying, man, this guy really stinks. I don't know that they're ready to concede that yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if this new coaching staff is kind of told, hey, let's see if you can get something out of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside before you just bail on him. And I think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside gets a chance in this offense before, like, Travis Fulgham. Think about it. Why was J.J. Arcega-Whiteside drafted? He was to be the heir apparent to Alshon Jeffrey, who has been here in his way for the last 2 seasons. Well, you can make an argument that he wasn't here last year, but Arcega-Whiteside, I think by that point, already was written off. But the previous season, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, he was supposed to be the heir apparent to Alshon Jeffrey. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside couldn't play in that role because Alshon was here. So they made him play another role. He didn't perform very well in that role. And I think that banished him, if you will, to the broom closet. But just keep in mind, they gave Andre Dillard a shot to play right tackle, and that didn't go very well either. But when they played him at left tackle, he was serviceable. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, you play in the slot or you play at the X position, probably not very good. Can I get regular reps playing the position that you drafted me for? Maybe I'll be successful. Problem was, you already showed you weren't successful at the other positions, and the coaching staff lost complete confidence in him. Not saying that J.J. Arcega-Whiteside can play, not saying that he doesn't deserve blame here, because quite frankly, I'm not sure that he can play, and I'm not counting on it either. I'm just giving you the message that the front office, I think, is portraying, is we think we gave the coaching staff some more weapons. They didn't use them properly. I'm excited, said Howie Roseman, to get this draft classes into another coach's hands, specifically a coach who has a background with wide receivers. 609-403-0973. Harris is watching on YouTube. Hey, Mike! Double exclamation point. All right, a lot of questions to unpack here. What do you think of Werner or both Chaz Surratt being late picks? So I don't think Surratt is going to be a late pick. I would imagine he is in the first, not first round, but in the second day of the draft, right? I would think Chaz Surratt is a, what do you think? What do you got? Second, third, somewhere in that round, right? And I think if you ended up with him, I talked about him with, man, we could ask DiCecco about him today. I know DiCecco likes he's an interesting cat. He was the kid that was the quarterback at North Carolina and then became a linebacker. I like him. But I would think that he's a little green. But I think his athletic ability might get, much like Davion Taylor, as you said, I think his athletic ability might get him. He's an older guy, too. He's 24 years old. I don't know what later round you're talking about, Harris. So if you want to see Chaz Surratt in the 5th or 6th round, I don't think that he gets there. That's just my opinion. I'm no draft Nick. Yeah. So yeah, of the two, Chaz Surratt entices me. Who's the other one that he asked about? Oh, Pete. Yeah. Ohio State. Now, what round would you say that he's going to go in? What do you got there? 3rd, 4th? I was going to say he's probably Friday or early Saturday. I would think that now Werner is not a guy that Andrew and I have talked about yet. I can bring him up today. He's intriguing. Interesting size, 6'3", 240. His father actually played for the Eagles for a little bit there, if you remember Greg Werner. His name blanked on me for a second. Yeah, I think the question that you're asking, Harris, essentially is you say, what would you double up at linebacker? Here's the thing. The Adam Kaplan question comes back. his comment comes back into play with this question. They signed Eric Wilson. They have Singleton. They've got, don't forget, TJ Edwards, a guy who's not awful. He's not great in coverage. That's the problem in a league that you need coverage. But Edwards can stop the run. Singleton's just kind of a grinder. He's a muck and grinder. He'd be a good hockey player, kid. And Wilson is better in coverage. So, yeah, you got to get more depth at linebacker. They drafted a guy in the 3rd round last year. So the question goes to, much like the Rieger question, does the front office say, we gave you a linebacker, you didn't do a good job with him? Or, I mean, are they to say, we like this new defensive coordinator and what he might do with the 3rd round pick we gave them last year? Because the last coaching staff turned their nose up at that 3rd round pick. That is a very interesting storyline to read there, too. No, I'm not telling you I think Davion Taylor is going to come out here and be Lawrence Taylor, but you took a guy in the 3rd round. I don't think you take a guy in the 3rd round thinking he's a 3-year project. If you're the front office, you probably want that guy playing. He didn't play a lick. And Jim Schwartz, he's an older guy, a little stuck in his ways maybe, has a little different principles. Maybe he says, you know what? This kid's not ready. He's not stepping on my field. Something to think about. Maybe Jonathan Gannon, a younger guy, is enthralled by this guy's athletic ability and talent and says he might make mistakes. But guess what? He's going to cover up some of those mistakes with outstanding plays. So there's a lot to unpack with that. Thank you for the question, Harris. Appreciate you watching. I got some more questions coming in. Let's see. Davis. All right, David is watching on Facebook. He's got it's a Hurley hat. I thought it was a Yankees hat. He's got a Hurley hat on. I was going to say, if he's got a Yankee hat, I'm not answering this question. I'm just kidding. David says, please do not take a quarterback within the first 4 rounds of this draft because God knows they're going to use their draft picks next year to move up in the draft if they have to get a real quarterback if Jalen Hurts' experiment doesn't work. All right. I agree. I don't think you take a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. Even the first 4 rounds is what you're saying. Okay, I can sign up for that. They got to get a quarterback somewhere in this draft, though. Somebody has to be the 3rd quarterback. You got to start grooming a backup. Somebody has to be the backup, because Flacco's on a 1-year deal. So you got to bring in a backup, a quarterback this year to be the 3rd guy, to be the backup next year. And as long as Hurts plays well, the best case scenario, boys and girls, is that Hurts plays well and the 3 picks you have in next year's draft, you can use to get weapons. Hurts played well. The team played well. They were 9-8, 8-9. That sounds so weird. I know somebody out there is listening like, wait, what? They added a 17th game this year. They're 7-10. They're 8-9. They're 9-8. They're 10-7. 11-6. That's not going to happen, I don't think. Could. I'm not ruling it out. I'm one of the few that wouldn't rule it out. But Hurts plays well. And you have 3 first-round picks next year. And you know what you would do then? 3 first-round picks next year if Hurts plays well. Now you can get them. Now you can go get the luxuries. Now I want to get a better receiver. Now I want to go get that offensive lineman because Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks. Now I want to go get that pass rusher because Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham are getting older. I don't know what the defensive tackle class next year looks like or the defensive end class next year looks like, but that's where you got 2 aging guys on your defensive front, and you can say, all right, now this is the year I replace them.
I'll give you a name, Kayvon Thibodeau of Oregon. He's supposed to be the next Chase Young. He's probably going to go in the top 5 next year. He's a freak. If you got 3 first-round picks and you don't need a quarterback, why not?
If you were called a freak, would you be upset by that?
No. Javon Curse was a freak.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, if you were the person that they labeled freak, like that's normally a negative connotation.
Okay, I'll call it.
It's somebody who like is called like a freak. You know, that's usually not good, but in this case, it's good.
Right, in this case, it's good, right? No, but Thibodeau is amazing.
Yeah.
That guy is a monster, and I would love to see a guy like that in an Eagles uniform.
All this conversation makes me yearn. Have you been watching any of the college football in the spring?
A little bit, because I feel like every time I turn on the TV, Jackson State.
I don't even
Deion
ever see it
Sanders
on. Who's carrying it?
ESPN2.
When do they play?
Saturday afternoons.
I never see them.
You know, my guy.
I don't watch a lot of Saturday
He's been calling like every Monmouth game this year.
Oh, they're playing?
Yeah, it's on ESPN3.
Okay, so, but they're not putting college football games on like CBS. The networks aren't carrying
It's
them.
all those ESPN, like ESPN2, ESPN3, ESPN.
For those of you who are like, what are you talking about? So a lot of the schools deferred to play in the fall because of COVID and moved them. So there's no major conferences, though, is there?
It's all FCS. And the playoffs start, I think, this weekend.
There was going to be some major conference. Like the Mountain West was going to do it, and then they decided to start their season late. Okay.
There's no FBS schools. It's all FCS.
Gotcha.
So
which is the old Division I AA.
Correct. So like Villanova's quarterback was on SportsCenter top 10 last weekend.
Yeah, that pass he made. I haven't seen one spring football game.
I feel like every time I turn on ESPN2, it's Jackson State because Deion Sanders on the sideline.
Oh, he's the coach. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Sports Bash is brought to you by JCPenney. Shop cool styles at hot, low prices during Power Penny Days. Get huge deals on spring looks and fresh home essentials in-store and online at jcp.com. All right. Keep the comments coming. Sal Pal at 3. Football at 4. Jeff Kerr tonight. We got a lot of NFL. I'll get to this text message on the other side. Has to do with Zach Ertz. Stick around. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. All right, a Friday edition of the Sports Bash. Happy Hour Friday, everybody. Hopefully you have a nice cold one between now and the end of the show. Maybe 2 or 3. Get a little funky in the comments section over there. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Let me go to the text board. Mike, what are you doing with Ertz draft day deal? Yeah, I think Ertz is probably part of a trade if they can, if somebody wants him, or one of those things that, hey, look, don't expect a lot. Don't expect you're getting something of value for Ertz. He's a throw-in to say, hey, we'll give you a third at Ertz so we can move up 3 spots. Ertz isn't getting you a first-round pick in next year's draft. Don't have any ideas of that. 4:48 on a Friday, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Jalen says Mike is fired up today. I'm always fired up, Jalen. Come on, man. I get 4 hours to do this. That's all I get. I get 4 hours. I ask for more time on the radio. They don't give it to me. They only give me 4 hours. I asked to do morning show, midday, and afternoon. I only got the afternoon. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm fired up. It's a Friday before the draft. I'm ready to go. Here we go, man. I love getting the questions from you guys. It's fun. Kind of real-time stuff. Bruce is watching on YouTube. He says, I don't think people are talking enough about Jalen Phillips to the Eagles. We talked a little bit about it, not to the extent that maybe you're thinking. He's a top pass rusher to most scouts and teams. He's also very similar build to DeForest Buckner of the Colts. Now, that's an interesting point you make. I mean, obviously, there's some Colts ties there. Yeah, we talked about Phillips with Mosher, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. We could bring him up again. Phillips is an interesting guy. I think the narrative here is interesting, is that the pass rushers in this draft class are just not all that strong. That's the big, kind of knock on this group of guys, is that they're just not a very deep group of pass rushers. Phillips, he's interesting. You look at a guy who's like 6'6", 250. He used to be a linebacker. He's probably like closer to 270 now. But back in the day, he's kind of like that undersized defensive end back in the day. But now that's what the defensive ends are. The defensive end class is just not all that deep. So you're right, maybe, but they're being so overshadowed. But Kwity Paye and Rousseau over at Miami, I find those guys really hard to draft. Because I just don't love the fact that they've played so little football. They've played so little football. Rousseau sits out. Kwity Paye sits out. He didn't sit out. He played like 4 games. Rousseau, Phillips, who, by the way, is Miami as well. Him and Rousseau were on the same team. Now, Rousseau opted out, and Jalen Phillips ended up playing. He had monster numbers. He had like 8 sacks this year. And how many games did they play? Miami was not this great team this year. I think they played 9 games, so he had 8 sacks in 9 games. The defensive end class just worries me. Jalen says Phillips is incredible, would be fine with that pick if they traded down. Yeah, those are guys that if you trade down for, I'm better off with. And defensive end's a spot they're going to need. Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Derek Barnett is really all they have right now. Right? They only have those couple guys. So you definitely need depth at that position. The question is, does it make sense at 12? And I don't think so. These guys are too now Jalen follows up and says, I would rather have Phillips than Kwity Paye. Give me upside any day. I don't know. Why do we think that Kwity Paye doesn't have upside? Right? Why wouldn't he have upside? We don't know enough about him either. He's played very little football. He's a guy that I would say this about Kwity Paye. Like, from watching him a little bit, if this is a different offensive draft class, the 4 quarterbacks, or really 5 quarterbacks, all these 3 wide receivers, Kyle Pitts, throw in the offensive lineman. If there isn't that much offensive talent depth, especially the quarterbacks where they're all being overdrafted, then is Kwity Paye a top 10 pick? Are we overthinking the fact that he hasn't played all that much? If you go by mock drafts, he is right around 14th on the board. Now, there's some people who kind of are, questioning that. Is he the best edge rusher out there? He's a guy who's very athletic if you watch him, but hasn't played a lot of football. And I think if you get a chance, he is very athletic. And the one problem I think a lot of people in this particular draft have with him is why he's not higher up is not only did he not play, he doesn't have great size. But very athletic. And I don't go off the 3-cone drills and that kind of stuff, but if you were watching that kind of stuff, he apparently had some legendary 3-cone drill that he had. What does that mean? I don't know. Right? I have no idea. But he's 260 pounds, and he's one of them guys that you just don't know a whole heck of a lot about. But I'm wondering about whether or not this is more because, look, the defensive ends, they just didn't play all that much. We know the defensive tackles in this draft class are not very good. It's not very deep. I think might have been Adam or maybe Andrew on Tuesday who said, there's really not very many even draftable defensive tackles. Forget it's not deep. There's not even very many draftable guys. Eagles definitely need an end. Definitely need, I think, a tackle. You don't take those until later on in the draft because you need a rotational tackle. I guess they'll try to get through with Fletcher Cox and Jaron Hargrave will play. But Jim Schwartz, now we're having this Jim Schwartz mindset that you probably have to change. He liked rotating those defensive tackles a lot more. Will they continue to do that with the new defensive coordinator? That's something to keep in mind. Yeah, Kwity Paye, in 26 games in 3 seasons, 10.5 sacks, 22 tackles for loss, and that's over 3 years, 26 games in 3 seasons. That's just not a lot of football. He only played, I think, like 4 games this year. Phillips had 8 sacks. He also had 15.5 tackles for loss. A lot of people like Phillips. Rousseau is a guy I just haven't seen enough of. I mean, he's an ultimate wild card that I just would not draft. Not at 12 anyway. All right, Sal Pal Antonio coming up on the other side for a Sal Pal Friday. The draft simulator. Who was his pick? Coming up next. Hi, happy hour Friday, everybody. What's going on? This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Sal Pal Antonio set to join us here. Of course, you see Sal all over the family of ESPN network programming, the ESPN senior national correspondent. And he joins us every Friday for a happy hour Sal Pal Friday, and he's on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as we are getting closer to the NFL draft and the draft simulator. I saw Sal on the KJZ mock draft. He had an interesting pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. It seems like the picks are all over the map here, Sal. We know this final week you start to get the BS meter running pretty high, but you've been pretty steadfast on taking a corner at that spot. And are you changing? Are you deviating from that as we get closer?
Well, I think it'll be hard to pass up Devontae Smith. That's for sure. But if Patrick Surtain is there now, Surtain was gone in that KJZ mock draft. But if he were there, I would take him for sure if I were the Eagles, because they need a corner opposite Darius Slay if they're going to play the defense I think they're going to play in the cover two. They're going to need a corner. Then the question remains, if J.C. Horn is there, Horn versus Smith at the 12th pick, I think 12 is kind of high for Horn. I don't know how you feel, Mike.
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent. I'm kind of torn by that, too. I agree with you. I'm like, Horn, to me, I feel like, and I got the email this morning with the draft simulation, Joe Banner and Mike Tannenbaum. Mike, we had on the show last week, and he talked a little bit about pass rusher because he thinks Howie Roseman, he knows Howie really well. He's done well in the offensive line, and they've gone defensive line a lot, going pass rusher there. Joe Banner knows this organization as well as anyone. That's the philosophy of this team. So I keep feeling offensive line or defense, trading back an offensive line or defensive line. Is that something that is more and more possible? Last week we talked about moving up into the 9 area, but I keep feeling more and more moving back and going with what they know.
Yeah, if they want to move up, they're not going to move up for Devontae Smith. They might move up for Patrick Surtain, but I don't see them moving up for a wide receiver for sure. So Mike Tannenbaum, as you know, hired Howie Roseman out of Fordham Law School. So he knows Howie extremely well.
Yeah.
And, of course, Joe Banner knows the organization. And I don't have to remind you that, when Howie Roseman was scouting players for Andy Reid once he first got started, he was at Michigan in the big house, and he had his binoculars trained on Brandon Graham, and he called Andy Reid on his cell phone, and he said, I got our next pick. I got our first-round pick. His name is Brandon Graham, and, of course, Graham went on to strip sack Tom Brady in Super Bowl 52, and they got to hoist the Lombardi Trophy in South Philadelphia. So, that was so in that simulated draft by Tannenbaum and Banner, which I took very seriously. They have the Eagles taking Kwity Paye. Now, am I pronouncing that correctly? I think I am.
Yep, you are.
He's the defensive end from Michigan. He has a very interesting background. Coming from Africa, and he's obviously a hungry player. He played hungry in college. He's got this 6'3", 280 frame. His 40 time was under 4.8, which is terrific for a defensive end. Not great. It's not the same as Gregory Rousseau out of Miami, who's at a 4.6 40 time, and is a little bit taller. 6'5", but 6'3" is pretty good for a guy that you could put into this Eagles defense and rush the passer. Now, is he worth the 12th pick, Mike? That's the question. Or do you trade back and try to take him some later on in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, we know this team likes to go that route. Derek Barnett, Brandon Graham is 2 of the picks that they've taken there. They also got Fletcher Cox way back, so they've done well in this spot. How much of I know we don't like to say need so much because you like to get the best player that you can, but is that a legitimate hole that this team has, and that 15 or 12 or wherever they get a guy, if they took one of those pass rushers, that would be applauded.
Yeah, I've said this to you before. If you draft for need, you're going to need a new job eventually. And you got to take the best player on your board. That's why you have a scouting staff. You rate players, not by position, but by comparison to everybody else on your board. So if Kwity Paye is their 12th ranked player or close to it, or if Devontae Smith, same deal, or if it is J.C. Horn in that general area, to me, of those three, I'm going J.C. Horn.
J.C. Horn, the corner, of course, South Carolina. You mentioned they might move up for Patrick Surtain. They would have to do that because do we still feel strongly that Dallas? I know Dallas is putting out the smoke screens. They're talking about every offensive player. Kyle Pitts, obviously, is an interesting guy. But do we feel pretty strongly, Sal, that they would still take Patrick Surtain if he was there?
I'd be shocked if they didn't, Mike. They gave up a franchise record number of points last year. Their defense has got a new defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. If you look at Dan Quinn's history, he's always had strong corners and strong safeties. When he was in Seattle, he lacked that in Atlanta, and it really hurt him. Surtain is a plug-in-and-play first-round blue-chip player, in my view. He's the last of the 10. You could probably take him 8 or 9, but you don't want to take him lower than 10. And I think Dallas, to pass him up at 10 would be a big mistake.
ESPN Sal Pal, ESPN senior national correspondent. Sal, I definitely want to get your take. We'll get back to the draft here in just a minute, but I want to get your take on Wednesday's press conference. Howie Roseman, Andy Weidel, and some would say the star of the show, he took over that show, was Nick Sirianni. Whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, we definitely got a different view of Nick Sirianni's personality on Wednesday.
And it was something that the Eagles sort of unveiled with Fran Duffy on their website, that his enthusiasm for the game, his competitiveness, his drive is apparently something that really impressed Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman and has impressed Frank Reich. Certainly, this guy wants to teach the game. But here's my view of it. I'm not sure that the public needs to see all of that because in this day and age with social media, Mike, it can become a polarizing thing. I think, your methods as a coach don't necessarily need to be unveiled to everybody everywhere because that's the sort of thing that you'd certainly want to keep to the relationships you have with your players, right? Sometimes those things get quirky. Sometimes people don't really understand what it is to be coached up at that level or to be coached up at all. Not many people are at competitive athletics at that level. So I'm not sure you need to really reveal all that, honestly, to tell you the truth. And of course, the reaction on social media was, I don't know,
all over the place.
Negative. It was overwhelmingly negative, I thought.
Yeah, it was all over the place for sure. There's no question about it. People were it was interesting because, Roseman's up there and Andy Weidel, I think they're mandated to be there. They don't want to do that, right? If they didn't have to, they wouldn't have been there.
I'm not so sure about that. I think all of these teams want to put their best foot forward. The National Football League's pretty good about making sure you pump up the draft, and one of the ways you do that with all 32 cities is getting everybody out there, and they like setting the agenda. So I'm not so sure about that, Mike. I think Roseman likes the limelight for sure.
All right. Well, he was asked by your colleague, Tim McManus, regarding last year and that they deviated from the draft board a little bit, and he didn't poo-poo it. He essentially, though, said, we don't want to write the book on that draft class, but we're excited about getting those players with our new coaching staff. Is he saying that he didn't think the last staff did a good enough job with the players they drafted?
That was certainly the way I interpreted it. There's no question about that.
Right.
Yeah. Jalen Rieger basically did not reach his potential because of the offensive coaching staff. That's bottom line. That's the way I interpreted it.
Yes, and they've also been getting criticized a lot for the receiver they took the year before. You wonder if if they're insinuating, hey, we've got a receiver head coach. We think we can get more out of these weapons than we were getting before. Who knows? I thought there was a lot of interesting things to take from the press conference, including, one of the things that they talked about, and I thought this got talked about a lot, but they really insinuated about the offensive line. Andy Weidel was asked about guards. They even said that Isaac Seumalo could play center and guard, which would not preclude them then from having to take one or the other. That was almost a hint to me that offensive line is heavily in play for them.
Yeah, they don't want, I don't think they want to. The feeling that I get in talking to people on background in NovaCare is that, one, they feel like they can compete in the division this year, that they're not that far away. And, truth be told, won 4 games. The Washington football team won 7 and won the division. So there's a difference of 3 games. And I buy into that. I believe that. I think
agree.
The division is. I think you and I agree on that. I think the division is weak enough where you could steal a game or 2 if you just do the right thing. 1, don't turn the ball over at the quarterback position. If you stop that, beautiful. Okay. 2, reduce the sacks by, let's say, from 65 to 40. Mike, that's not a lot to ask. If you can get it down to 40 or 45, now you're in games. If you're not turning the ball over at the quarterback position, I'm looking at a statistics here that just blows me away. Carson Wentz, franchise quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, won 11 games in his second year in the season, was off target throwing the football 24%. That was the most of any starting quarterback in the National Football League last year. Worse than Dwayne Haskins.
Jeez.
Worse than Drew Lock. Worse than Mitchell Trubisky. Worse than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was at 17%. Worse than Daniel Jones and Tua Tagovailoa. So, all you've got to do is get it to the point where Carson Wentz is in the Daniel Jones category and is not turning the ball over, and they're sacking the quarterback only 40 times instead of 65. Mike, they may win 2 or 3 games. Don't you think?
I've been accused of kind of being on this island by myself, but I agree. If you just got mediocre quarterback play last year, you're probably 500. And the injuries that they have now, if that occurs again, you might have another bad season. But look at San Francisco. They were in the Super Bowl the year before. Were they a 6-win team, or did the injuries help them get to 6 wins? I feel
right. That's part one of the way the Eagles feel. Sorry to interrupt you. Yes, that's part one of the way the Eagles feel inside NovaCare, having talked to people. They feel like they can compete if they just do a few things better than they did last year. The other thing that we mentioned last week on your show was if they just stop the big play cover 2, play 2 deep safeties instead of single high, and don't give up the big play. At least reduce it by 30%, which is not a lot to ask. Now you're in 3 or 4 games in a week schedule.
Very weak schedule.
And a 17-game season. Maybe you get to 7 or 8 wins. Now you're in the ballgame. And then the second thing is, though, they want to compete this year, but they don't want to take, quote, shortcuts, unquote, in terms of rebuilding long term. Now, let me translate that for you. This is exactly what I was told. So I'm using it in quotes because it was what I was told on several occasions. That means exactly what you were just saying, Mike. They don't want to take shortcuts, meaning build from the inside out, stay to the core values that they had when they drafted Fletcher Cox, they drafted Lane Johnson, they drafted Brandon Graham, they drafted Jason Kelsey, who are the cornerstones of the trenches of the football team.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's the one spot, Sal, that you can look back and say they have done a good job, regardless of round. I mean, they got Mailata in the 7th. They got Seumalo in the 3rd. They found, guys, Kelsey in the 6th. That's one spot that they have done a pretty good job in. Sweat in the 4th. The one guy that I guess the jury's out on is Barnett. I don't know how they feel about him, but he's kind of been incomplete, maybe. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, sure, but of course there's the Danny Watkins thing. But I mean, they've had
Yes.
some misses, but a lot of that has to do with Jeff Stoutland, for sure.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
the way he's developed. I mean, and I don't think Mailata is a starter in the National Football League. He hasn't proven that to me yet, and they did miss on Andre Dillard, as we know. So, but getting back to your point, Mike, which is a good one, is that at 12, they can go in a lot of different directions, depending on the position that they're targeting or the player that they're targeting. But the bottom line is, if you draft for need and ignore your board in the end, like they did with Dillard, and I think they drafted for need with Dillard, then you really hurt yourself long term.
A Sal Pal Friday right here, ESPN senior national correspondent. The show was excellent the other night. Really enjoyed that. The draft stuff is a lot of fun down the stretch they come. You had the mock draft pick, KJZ Devonta Smith. If he's there, we'll see. If a corner is there, do they trade back? That's what makes it so interesting, and we'll do it again. Of course, the draft on Friday, we will know the next time we chat, Sal, who the Eagles have selected, and that will be a very interesting piece to see where the next step of Eagles football. This is an important one. They have, 4 picks in the top 85 this year and 4 picks in the first 2 rounds as of now for next year. So this thing might flip around pretty quick for this Eagles organization, but it all starts on Thursday night, the NFL draft, ESPN's coverage, and of course a Sal Pal Friday here on the Sports Bash. Johnny G, the Burger Real Estate team, they're great, and they presented Sal Pal here on the Friday. Thank you, man.
Oh, thank you. And don't forget our primetime draft special for the NFL Matchup Show is Tuesday night, April 27th, 10 p.m., prime time, ESPN2. We got tremendous reaction from the first show on Wednesday night, and the second, part 2, is Tuesday night with my colleagues Greg Cosell and Matt Bowen. And thanks to Johnny G and the Griner team at Burger Realty in Ocean City for supporting my appearance on this wonderful program on Friday afternoons. Thank you, Michael.
All right, Sal, take care. There's Sal Palantonio, a Sal Pal Friday in the books, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Hey, man, you heard what he said. They feel inside the building that they're a little closer, and I've been saying it. I think they feel the same way. It is the Sports Bash Live. We got more on that coming up. What is your take? Hit me up in the text, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. I'm back with Inside the Sixers. They lost again, 3 in a row. Last night in Milwaukee, they lose to the Bucks. Eastern Conference getting a little tighter. Sixers lose last night, third time in a row that they've lost. This one on the road in Milwaukee. You look at a Milwaukee team that didn't play since Monday. Philly was gassed last night. You could see not only were they gassed, they were shorthanded. No Embiid, no Simmons. And they said 50-50 that Simmons plays on Sunday in that game against the Bucks. Actually, it's on Saturday. Sports Bash brought to you by your Delaware Valley Acura dealers. For great deals on Acura's award-winning lineup, shop online at DelValAcuraDealers.com. Mike, any coincidence the Sixers suck since you said Embiid is uncomparable? No. He's a beast. Did you see he scored 39 points and had 17 rebounds the other night? You know, that guy Simmons and Harris, they're pretty good. You're playing the number 2 seed in the West and the number 3 seed in the East, who's now a game and a half behind you after that win last night. They've played a tough schedule without 2 of their best players. So is the coincidence there that the schedule has been very difficult? I will say this. I will give a little credence to something here. The Sixers have very few wins against teams that are at full strength in the top of the standings. I think they beat Utah one time. I think they might have beat Denver once. They don't have a lot of wins against teams at full strength. That's something to keep in mind. But the team is 9-9 without Joel Embiid. They won a couple games without him a couple weeks ago. But let's be honest. Joel Embiid has been absolutely almost unstoppable. I think last night he looked a little tired. Back-to-backs, basically out there by himself. No Simmons. No Embiid. It is a tough ask for him, right? It's a tough ask for him to get out there and carry this team again. Hey, Mike, to all the Ben Simmons haters, 3 straight losses without him. You better start appreciating all the little things he does besides scoring. He is missed, period. You don't have to convince me. I understand basketball. Most people listening don't. They think scoring's the only thing that matters. I get it. Scoring's what they show on SportsCenter highlights, but Ben Simmons is invaluable to this team. They gave up 127 points last night. Now, I get it. Milwaukee hasn't played since Monday. The schedule makers didn't do the Sixers any favors with this game. But Milwaukee hadn't played since Monday. Phillies on the back-to-back. They're in a tough spot. But defensively, without Ben Simmons, they stink. They don't have anybody to defend on the ball. And Doc Rivers talked about this last night. That if they hadn't played back-to-back, that Embiid would have played Antetokounmpo. And if Simmons was there, that he would have played Antetokounmpo. So they would have had those 2 guys switching on Giannis last night. Well, they played the night before, so he didn't want to use Embiid there. If it's a playoff game, it's a different situation. So, again, I can't take a lot from that game last night, which sucks because you want to, but they're playing 3 games in a row without Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. What am I supposed to make of that? What am I supposed to do with that? Well, you lost to the Bucks on the road on a back-to-back when they haven't played since Monday, and you didn't have your 2, most, other than Joel Embiid, your next 2 most important players. What do you want me to do with that? So I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm all that concerned, but there is some concerning things. Which is, when is Ben Simmons going to return? What is even wrong with the guy? They said it's a 50-50 chance that he even plays tomorrow. He didn't make the trip. He didn't go to Milwaukee. So if he does play tomorrow, he'd have to get there. Not that he can't. I'm not saying that he can't arrange that. But he didn't make the trip out there, which would say he was sick enough. They say he's got an illness. I don't know what that even, they said it's a non-COVID related illness. Right? So I don't know what that means. In this day and age, I haven't heard anybody getting the flu for quite some time. The flu can knock you up, but this is not flu season. I mean, the flu can knock you out for a couple days. We're trying to catch up with Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider, see if we can get some more information. I don't think not that I think Paul has the information. I don't think the Sixers have really told us what has happened with Joel Embiid. But let's not get out of hand here. All right there, buddy. I know everybody wants to say, you said this, you were wrong. Joel Embiid is, by the way, the Sixers could go 0-10, and Joel Embiid is, there's not another player like him. I would ask, give me another player that compares to Joel Embiid in the league. Nobody. So the Sixers could go 0-82. That doesn't mean that there's another player in the league that plays like him. Doesn't matter the success or failure of the team when talking about the individual. So, you know, they're struggling right now without Ben Simmons. That's my takeaway. Forget Tobias Harris not being there. Ben Simmons. That's the answer. Why are they struggling? Ben Simmons, not there. He runs the defense. He's essentially the head of the snake on the defense. We heard that term a lot a couple of years ago. Take away the head of the snake. It was Ben Simmons. Well, you can't do that anymore because of Joel Embiid. When it comes to defense, though, can't do it. They can't play without Ben Simmons. This team is lost defensively without Ben Simmons. Evident. And they don't have that second scorer. That secondary guy, you know, if you were watching last night, right? And I had to record it and watch it late. I had a baseball game last night, so I had to watch it when I got home last night. And at first I'm thinking, man, they just have no legs, no life, nothing. But in the end, they still scored 117 points in the game, and I took a couple takeaways. Now, Harris played last night, obviously, but he didn't seem to be himself. It's Simmons was the guy that, you know, who has been out defensively. So Embiid, he didn't see, I think Embiid had like 3 rebounds in the game last night. I think George Hill, who started the game last night, it was good to see him out there for the third game now, kind of getting some run in. But Curry shot the ball well. Danny Green did Zippo last night, right? The one guy that I was happy to see, that I was encouraged with last night, was Milton. I thought Milton had his best game in like a week or two. Milton had his best game. He finally looked like he snapped out of it a little bit. So if I'm taking anything from what I saw last night, I thought Embiid looked a little sluggish. I think Harris was a little rusty, even though, you know, he had 18 points. Defensively, he looked a little sluggish. Hill still has the rust to start knocking off. So they had 3 guys in the lineup that I thought looked a little sluggish. But I thought Milton had a little something last night. He was the one guy that I thought at least had a little something last night, which was a good sign. Because they got to get him back, man. He's an important – I know that they added Hill, and it's weird because now you have Hill back, but you don't have Simmons. So you can't use Hill in the role that you want to use him in. You want Hill coming off the bench and playing with Milton. Or you want Hill playing side by side with Simmons in minutes. And I think you're going to see Hill closing games out defensively over Curry. I think Curry will probably start games, and I think Hill will probably close games. That's how I would kind of see it. But keep this in mind, too. You got to find roles for, and I don't think Korkmaz didn't play last night either. There's another, not that I know people out there would say, who the hell cares about Korkmaz? He's been a guy in their offense this year. They scored 117 points last night. And I know they came back. They were down. They came back in the fourth. But there was another shooter that didn't have last night. And Green didn't do anything last night either. Green played 15 minutes, shot 1-3, had no points. Thybulle's another one. He played 25 minutes last night. I'm interested to see what they do with him come playoff time when we get to that point. What do they do come playoff time? Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Inside the Sixers, and of course the Sixers are off till tomorrow. Thank gosh, they needed it. They're in Milwaukee for another night. You ever been to Milwaukee? Milwaukee's an underrated place. Very fun. A lot of fun. Great town. I stayed in the Jeffrey Dahmer Hotel. It's not named after him, but it's the hotel that he apparently stayed in and did some of his deeds, I guess, if you will. There's a room that Jeffrey Dahmer used to stay in. I think if you go to the hotel, you can actually stay in that room. Who would want to do that? I don't know. But Milwaukee's a great town. If you've ever been to Milwaukee or never been to Milwaukee, highly suggest. Wait till the weather gets a little nicer. It's really nice out. Great town. When it's cold, probably not as good. Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN is brought to you by Dorothy Gale Roofing. No place like your home. If you have a leak or need a new roof, call Dorothy Gale Roofing, 877-97-KEVIN, or visit them online at DorothyGale.com. All right, plenty to get to. We still have a ton of draft questions that have been coming in throughout the show. We will post them and pop them up on the screen and get into some of those. We've got football at 4 with Andrew DiCecco. So, with Andrew coming up at 4 o'clock, if you have draft questions for Andrew, you can post those now at 609-403-0973. If you're watching the show, post them in the chat section, and Andrew will be on for football at 4 today on a Friday. Bob Wankel will talk some Phils in about an hour. Happy Hour Friday with the PT tonight. All right. When we come back, we will roll down some of these draft questions. Phillies, by the way, in Colorado. An hour from now, Bob Wankel on that. All right, we're just rolling. Friday, happy hour. Have one. Need one. Sports Bash. All right, welcome back, Sports Bash. By the way, I forgot, we haven't mentioned, UFC 261 is this weekend, as you just heard Josh in that ad right there. So it looks like you like Rose Namajunas in the women's strawweight. Usman Masvidal is the main event. Lionheart's on this card, right? I think he's the first fight of the night in the light heavyweight. I'm interested in this card. Let's see. I know, Josh, you're a little bit more depthful of knowledge of the UFC than I would be here, but I think this has 1, 2, 3. I mean, the whole card, all 5 on the main card are very intriguing. I mean, you don't usually see 5 on the main card that you're all intrigued by, but I think if you're a UFC fan out there, by the way, Pat Sabatini is on the prelim on ESPN. I have called a bunch of his fights. He's the real deal, man. He can fight. He's definitely worth checking in. He's on the prelims tomorrow night on ESPN. So Pat Sabatini, check out that. I don't know when that starts. But,
8 o'clock on ESPN.
All right, so he'll probably be the opening. All right, so 8 o'clock tomorrow night on ESPN. Pat Sabatini, he's a CFFC guy.
So this is, remember, the first fight in front of fans for the UFC in America in over a year.
Yeah, this is down in Jacksonville.
Right. So
Jacksonville has been having a lot of events down here.
So the way it works is, so Jacksonville was the first bubble environment in America for any sporting event last year.
Right.
When the UFC had a few events down there. And their deal with the UFC was, we will be the place that you bring your first event to. They promised them that. So what the UFC did is they're following what Florida's been doing with a lot of their COVID protocol, which is for sporting events, they have people who stand at the door and they hand you masks, and they have the temperature checks, and they have the sniffing dogs. I don't know if you heard about this. A lot of the events in Florida now, they have the dogs apparently that can check if you have COVID or not, which is fascinating to me. But that's also because I'm a geek. So, but
I've heard of this. Yeah, they do them at the Heat games.
Yeah, they also been doing it at some of the Lightning games as well in Tampa. So the UFC is planning to have what is considered a capacity crowd in this arena. That is a unique setup. I don't know if you've ever seen the Jacksonville arena they're in, but it's a little more spacious than your typical sporting event arena. So they're going to be able to, hopefully, they believe, to get somewhere between 10 and 15,000 in there. So they wanted to get a really, really good main card together, not just for the pay-per-view, but for the people who would be attending.
Well, and look, this is a fight that's headlined by a monster main event. So
and 2 guys who train in Florida.
Well, that regardless, nobody else cares about that but you. That being said,
Florida people do. Come on.
Well, they're not listening. Nobody cares where these guys train. That's not a part of the storyline one bit. What's part of the storyline is Masvidal is a huge name. Usman, who's the better fighter, more people know Masvidal. He's a bigger name. He's a character. That's part of the allure of this. They fought once, and it was on a 1-week notice, essentially.
Right.
So, and Usman technically just whipped him, I thought.
Oh, he dominated him.
Absolutely technically whipped him. But how much is that? Is that Masvidal had to cut so much weight in such a short amount of time and barely could get ready for this? I don't know. Masvidal, I thought, for getting technically whipped, he didn't quit. He didn't run out of gas. I mean, he did run out of gas, but he didn't like run out of gas to the point that he got. They went the distance.
Yes.
I was impressed by the fact that he was able to hang in there on such short notice against a technically more sound fighter. I am highly intrigued to see with a full camp what this fight looks like. How different will Masvidal look with a full camp now? I think that is a huge storyline, not where they both train.
2 things. Number one, Masvidal has claimed in multiple interviews that Usman does not hit that hard. And
it doesn't matter, though.
Well, in his mind, it does matter because he feels like he believes that guys who hit him hard are the most trouble for him.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can understand in a knockout situation. If you're concerned about being knocked out, the power of the punch doesn't take away the amount of points you can score with said punches.
Oh, I agree with you. But in Masvidal's mind, and according to him in interviews, he believes that if you can't punch him hard enough, he can eat those punches and eventually finish you in the fight.
All right. Well, that's definitely a strategy, but he's got to be able to, just because he can take the punch, they're still scoring. He has to, I'm sure he understands that. I'm sure his team understands that.
Now, the other side of the argument is Usman has come out and said that he wants to dominate Masvidal again and finish him to prove that the first fight wasn't a fluke.
I don't know that I wouldn't call the first fight a fluke so much, more so that he was just like Usman. To me, he was born to do this. Masvidal is a tremendous physical athlete who's doing this. That doesn't mean that but you got for instance, okay, you get a guy who wrestles. You can get a guy who wrestles. If he started at 8 years old, he just technically has more skills. He has the intuition. He has the instincts. You could get a better physical athlete, but if he doesn't have the technical ability, the other guy who might not be as athletic or strong, he still can score points on you and that to me is Usman versus Masvidal. Usman is just born to do this. Masvidal is just a tremendous athlete who is very skilled, but his skill set is more raw. Usman's is more innate.
Right. And what it also comes down to is the reason why Usman's being talked about as potentially one of the greatest welterweights of all time. It has to do with that wrestling factor you brought in, because all of those guys at welterweight who have been the greats, George St. Pierre, Matt Hughes, they're all wrestlers. And Usman falls right into that category. And of course, Tyron Woodley would be behind Usman, in my opinion, in the all-time rankings. And that's on Usman's side. And that is, there's a long, long history of guys being successful.
I've called a lot of fights. Obviously I don't have this huge background on all these guys. Of all the guys that I've called and watched and fought, and Usman to me is one of the more technically brilliant guys at watching. You watch him and you're just breathtaking by the fact that he can do it in so many different. He just seems that he is, that famous Jeff Lurie line. I want to be 5 years ahead of being 5 years ahead. Usman just seems like he is 5 years ahead. And I mean, to me, of all the guys I've watched, he is technically the best, I think.
Well, also,
do you agree with that? Or do you have somebody else?
Well, he's definitely up there. But part of the reason why he's up there, as you mentioned, the 5 years ahead, is because he's constantly evolving. Something that Ronda Rousey didn't do, Usman is doing, which is he said, I've learned everything I can from my current coaches. I'm going to go find some other people to help me too. I'm going to go find other people to make me better. And that's a credit to him, saying, how I am now is not enough. I want to be even better. So when you say 5 years ahead, you could say that Usman is thinking that way. He's not thinking about just the next fight. He's thinking about the next 5 years of fights, because he believes he could be one of the greatest of all time. And being a technician as a fighter is very, very important, because we've seen a lot of guys, as you mentioned with Masvidal, these physical athletes, okay, your Masvidals, your Brock Lesnar, for example, your guys who are these phenomenal athletes, they meet the technicians and they have a lot of trouble. There's a reason why Brock Lesnar's heavyweight championship reign came to an end, because he started getting blitzkrieged by dudes who are better technical fighters.
I think it's going to be fun. Second favorite fight of the night.
Oh, it's definitely Rose Namajunas versus Wei Lang. I mean, you have two fighters who are at the top of their game. Rose is a former champion. Wei is the current champion. And there's a little bit of trash talk. Rose had some controversial comments because she's from Lithuania, that she feels like, she's representing her country against communism, and that Wei feels like she's representing China against the world in this environment of anti-Asian sentiment out there. So there's been a little bit of choppiness between the two women, and they're both among the best in the world at what they do. And I think if the best version of Rose shows up, which I expect it to, I think she could finish Wei. And I think that's something that has to be kept in mind in this fight, because when Rose is at the top of her game, she could beat almost anyone not named Valentina Shevchenko in those lower weight classes for women. Whereas Wei, you could argue that she's a champion, not as much because she's the best in the world, but because she's fought fighters at the right place at the right time. She fought Joanna Jacek when Joanna was coming off some personal problems in her life. She's fought a lot of fighters along the way at very opportune times when those fighters have some other things going on in their lives.
Yeah, I think this is, as you mentioned, that's a fantastic fight as well. You've got Uriah Hard and Chris Weidman. That's another one that I think
Weidman, the former middleweight champion, a guy who has experimented going up in weight class at 205, didn't work out too well. He's really had to try to go find himself again. That's a dude who's a technician, you mentioned earlier, phenomenal talent, but he's had this trouble of putting it together again consistently since he lost the belt.
And Lionheart is, a veteran guy. He's kind of, he's at an interesting crossroads. He fought John Jones, and then after that, he kind of fell off the map a little bit here. This is kind of like your build yourself back up fight. He
is trying to avoid becoming what we call the gatekeeper. He's trying to avoid becoming the guy that everyone,
the young guy, fights to try to start their career.
Right. He's the guy. He doesn't want to become the guy that people fight just because they have to prove that they're legitimate. He wants another title shot because he knows there's no more John Jones in the division.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. 261 tomorrow night. And again, for those of you out there, Pat Sabatini, he's fighting on the prelim card. That's an ESPN free one, so you can watch that on the free ESPN.
That's a fun fighter to watch too.
He's and you talk about technically sound. He's one of those type of guys. If you watch Sean Brady, who fights at UFC now, Pat is a kind of they train together. And you could see a lot of Pat and Sean.
And Sean won his first UFC fight too, over a veteran who a lot of people weren't giving him a lot of chances against.
Yeah, that as he fought, I think he's fought a second time since then.
I think so. Yeah. I forget which card it was on specifically, but I think it was a few months ago.
Yeah, I think let's see I think he has fought a second time. I got to check that out, but. Let's see, UFC. Oh, he's fought 1, 2, 3. He's fought 4 UFC fights now, and he's won all 4. So he has yet to lose ever in any professional fight. He won all his CFFC fights 10-0, and then in UFC he is 4-0. He last fought on March the 6th. I thought he fought again. You know what? He fought on the UFC on ESPN. That was his debut,
right? And
then he fought on 2 fight nights. He fought on the 259 card.
Yeah, the Court McGee fight that he first won was a huge eye-opener for a lot of people. And, from what I understand, he's in a position that he can really, by next year, if he keeps winning, he could be a contender.
He's very good. He's very good. If you haven't seen Sean Brady, and if you're hearing we're talking about Sean Brady, check out Pat Sabatini this week, tomorrow night. He is very good. All right, Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. It's funny. So by the way, I just heard from Hudrick. He had a little bit of a family emergency, but he is going to jump on with us at 4:25 today. So we'll talk to Paul at 4:25. So we'll get his take. Now there's a gentleman who believes that we are believing too much in the Sixers line of BS, meaning that they were tired, they struggled. It was an expected loss. They can't handle the stress of back-to-back games. Please, man, no intellectual or intestinal fortitude. They are weak. You know, it's funny. This was the narrative when they had Brett Brown, that they, he said something about no heart, poor nutrition, poor sleep habits. I mean, he literally sounds like a guy who is a booger picker.
Who is he, Chip Kelly?
I mean, this stuff is so far from being accurate. By the way, you obviously don't watch the NBA. Back-to-back teams' records are just not very good. Teams on the back-to-back are just not good.
If you bet against the team on a back-to-back every time it happens, you are winning at a 60% clip at the Bucks.
Yeah, teams on back-to-backs are not very good. The Bucks are a very good team who were well-rested. They last played Monday night. By the way, the game was in Milwaukee against a very good team. Did you think you were going to play off a back-to-back and then go to Milwaukee? Playing against the Bucks well-rested in their building is not easy.
You're not playing
let alone
Magic.
On a back-to-back. The Sixers have now played 6 games in 11 days. So if you want to believe that they are weak-minded, that's fine. I think if you were to say, if you watched the game last night and stopped picking your nose, you would see one team had their legs. The other team looked like they were short-handed and gassed. If that's an excuse, then fine, but watch the game and tell me what you thought. Yes, indeed. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it's brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco's here on a Friday to answer your draft questions. If you have questions on the NFL draft for Andrew, you can text 609-403-0973, or if you're watching the show live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, leave a comment in the chat section, and Andrew will answer your NFL draft questions. We have questions for Andrew as well. We are less than a week away from the NFL draft, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on this happy hour Friday. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Happy to be talking a little draft, right? Are you tired out from the draft yet?
Let's just say I'm ready for it to get here.
All right. Well, people still have a ton of questions for you. We took a lot of questions early in the show in the build-up, getting ready to have you on. So let's throw a couple questions right off the bat. By the way, there was a trade that just happened in the NFL. I don't know if you saw this or not, but the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens made a trade. This is kind of interesting because Kansas City is trading its first-round pick along with 3 other picks in exchange for Pro Bowl tackle Orlando Brown. I guess the moral of this story might be that Kansas City, who needs offensive line help, that's obvious, didn't like the offensive tackles in this draft class.
I mean, that's one school of thought, but I mean, you could also say that they see that their window right now, they're trying to maximize that window, and they saw a chance to get a good veteran player that's going to add another piece to a loaded roster. And I mean, they're going to make another run. I mean, that was one of their biggest weaknesses, and now they've kind of rectified that.
Yeah. Now Baltimore will end up with the 27th and the 31st pick. So they will have 2 picks right there late in the first round for the Baltimore Ravens. And the Ravens are expected to sign Alejandro Villanueva. So they'll trade Brown, get a cheaper version there, and get another pick. So things are starting to happen here. So, Andrew, a lot of questions are coming in from our listeners today. And let's kind of unpack some of these things and kind of get your take on this. All right. Let's see. Where do we want to start here and go? All right. I know there's guys. All right. You'll like this one. This is from Harris. What do you think of Werner or both Chaz Surratt being late picks? Would you double up on linebackers? Where do you project Werner and Surratt being?
Yeah, I think Warner and Surratt, they're going to be third-round picks, probably in the later portion of the third round. I like Warner a little bit better. I think, to me, he's a little bit more of a polished player, a little bit more pro-ready that you can throw in on defense, and he's going to step right in and make some plays. I think Surratt really needs – he's more of a pass coverage linebacker, but he's very limited in terms of what he's able to do. I still think he needs to develop his play strength and really get a little bit I mean, he doesn't have a ton of he really stood out that one season. So, I mean, he really doesn't have a whole lot out there. And I think he has a lot of questions to answer about his game yet. Whereas Warner, I think, is a little bit more of a pro-ready prospect.
So I agree. When the question came up earlier, I said probably third-round picks for both those guys. Do you think the Eagles need to end up with a linebacker or 2 in this particular draft?
Well, I mean, in the previous regime, it would be lucky if the Eagles took 1 linebacker. So to think that they would take 2 is a little bit. I don't necessarily see it going quite that way, but I do think that they're going to probably take 1 a little bit higher on the higher side. If I were them, I would go Baron Browning at 37, or I would consider trying to pry away Jabril Cox, who's going to go somewhere between 37 and 70, and find a way to get him. Those are 2 guys that I really like.
I want to get,
especially for that fit.
I want to get your opinion on something that Howie Roseman said the other day. He said, "I don't want to close the book on last year's draft class, and we're excited about the new coaching staff getting their hands on these guys." Did you read that as we took guys last year that were talented, but our coaching staff didn't get enough out of them? And I say on the offensive side of the ball, Jalen Reagor. On the defensive side of the ball, They drafted a linebacker in the 3rd round last year who played nothing. He gave them Zippo on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Is that their way of saying we think this new defensive staff might get something out of him?
Well, those are comments that you would expect to hear, right? And I think to an extent there's something to that. I mean, in the case of Jalen Reagor, I thought he was a little bit misutilized, and he was billed as being this versatile offensive weapon that you can align everywhere and find different ways, creative ways to get him the football. And he was touted for his big playability. But looking at someone like a Davion Taylor, I mean, when he was picked, he was never in the plans to step in right away and make contributions, right? I mean, he was at least 2 or 3 years away from being able to step in and make plays for the defense. He's more of a special teams guy. If that, he has a lot to learn about. He's relatively new to the game of football. So, I mean, I don't know how much the previous regime was really going to get out of a Davion Taylor regardless. I mean, there were certain players that I thought that they reached on, maybe questionable fits. So, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag with that comment.
Yeah, and again, I'm not suggesting that I think Davion Taylor could play. You've well documented. You had him as like a fifth rounder?
Yeah. 5th rounder, yeah.
All right, so we'll see what happens with Davion Taylor. There was a good question on the linebackers here. Beth wants to know about Kellen Mond, Davis Mills. Could be late round options. Another guy she wanted you to break down is Patty Fisher. Have the Eagles spoken to any of these guys?
I mean, to my knowledge, they haven't really poked and prodded too significantly at these guys. But I mean, look, we'll look at the quarterbacks here: Kellen Mond and Davis Mills from Stanford. Those are 2 guys that have varying degrees of upside. And when you're looking at these day 3 quarterbacks, you're looking for traits, right? You're looking for characteristics that they have that may not be entirely refined, but something that if you get them in an NFL system, they can be ironed out and they might have something there. And I think both of those guys, in both cases, they both have NFL skill sets. They're just a little bit inconsistent in certain areas of their game. Kellen Mond, I would say he has a bit of an awkward delivery. But those are like the abilities is clearly there. And I think Brian Johnson will be able to get that, hopefully be able to tap into Jalen Hurts. And I certainly think he can do the same with a Kellen Mond or a Mills. As far as Patty Fisher is another one of those later round linebackers that I think that if they were to go 2 linebackers and double dip, he'd be someone that you take a shot on. I don't think he's athletic. I don't think he moves as well as some of the other guys that I've outlined. Yeah. But I think that he has a sharp football acumen, and those are the type of players that you like to get in. You like to select later in the draft because if you grab them, they can step in and make some plays right away.
All right, Bruce wants to know. He says, I don't think people are talking enough about Jalen Phillips to the Eagles. He is the top pass rusher to most scouts and teams. Has also a very similar build to DeForest Buckner of the Colts. I guess that Colt kind of connection there with that staff. Mm-hmm. But in your mind, everybody's talking about Kwity Paye and Rousseau. Is his teammate the best of that group?
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Phillips is someone who has intriguing intangibles. He certainly has that freakish build, but so does Rousseau. But I mean, when you're looking at Jalen Phillips, he does have that an injury history that's a bit concerning. If you're the Eagles, who you really need to take prospects with a clean bill of health, given their history, and they need guys who can step in and play right away. You already have a defensive end in Josh Sweat who has a lengthy injury history dating back to high school. I don't know if that's the route that I would necessarily go at 12 when there's other guys that are in a similar tier, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. And another comment on Rousseau was that he didn't test well at his pro day. He took the whole year off. Would that concern you, taking him at 12 or even trading back, say at where at the highest, like if you traded back and they took Rousseau, where would you feel comfortable taking him? He worries me not playing, very raw.
Yeah, incredibly raw. And you always worry about those 1 year wonders, Mike. And as freakishly athletic as he may be, and he has the prototypical build, he still needs to add a lot of size to his frame. He only did it for one season. He really won on his athleticism. He didn't really have when his initial pass rush plan was shut down, he didn't know how to counter that. Just a raw player that was able to just win on sheer athleticism and size and his length. And when you're looking at a first round player, I mean, he's a bit more of a project compared to like a Kwity Paye or even, Jalen Phillips or somebody like that. So, I mean, he has an immensely high upside, but I just don't know that the Eagles are the team that's going to be able to roll the dice on him.
All right. Frank wants to know, Andrew, if the Eagles move up, what players do you think they would target in a move up scenario?
I certainly think Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts would be certainly guys that if they're going to move up, those are guys you're going to do. They're both probably the biggest, the most dynamic offensive playmakers in this draft, and would certainly add another dimension to an Eagles offense that isn't currently there. And they both have all pro potential. I mean, those guys are going to be. They both make big plays, and they both can affect all three levels of the field. And when you're moving up for a player like that, I mean, I think you do whatever. If those are your guys, you do whatever it takes to get one of them.
All right. I spoke about this yesterday. Somebody just texted in and says, Mike, ask Andrew if he thinks the Bears would part with a 1 next year, and that would be from 20 to 12. If you're the Bears, you call the Eagles. I said, if I'm the Eagles, I'm demanding a first-round pick next year. You want a quarterback. I know you do. There's only one left. So if you want it, you got to pay a premium. Do you think, the text message wants to know if you agree with me that the Eagles could ask for a 1 in that case?
I certainly think that they should and they would ask for a 1 in that case. I just don't know. I think that might be where the conversation sort of ends if you're the Chicago Bears. And they may end up just going the Kyle Trask route and waiting a little bit and grabbing someone like that.
If the Eagles were in the 20 range, is there players in that range that you feel more comfortable with? Obviously you would than at 12, but are there guys in that 20 range that you would say, yeah, move back to 20 and grab this group of guys?
I mean, maybe a Russo. I mean, if you're talking about taking somebody in the 20s, he may fall just because of how raw he is. And at that point, I think that'd be decent value. There's always a chance that Kwity Paye kind of slides down there a little bit. I mean, I would look at pass rusher or possibly offensive tackle in that 17 to 20 range. But I mean, if I'm the Eagles, they're in a sweet spot at 12. I would stay right where they are because they should have their pick from some pretty good prospects, such as J.C. Horn and possibly Jalen Waddle and some of those guys.
Would you move back to 15?
15 is, to be honest with you, is the furthest that I would go because that's right in that spot where I think you could still get a Kwity Paye there,
right?
Or a Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle from Alabama. Someone like that. I mean, you can drop down to 15 and still probably get one of those guys.
Right. That means you would have dealt with the Patriots, obviously, if you were flip-flopping spots with them. All right. More draft questions are coming in for Andrew DiCecco. What are your thoughts on this? How John Clayton was on with me Wednesday, and he thought the draft was only about 5 rounds deep, that after that, you're going to get a lot of undraftable players because of the amount of players that opted to stay in college. In other words, seniors that could have came out, but because of the COVID, elected to return as seniors again. So he feels that after the 5th or into the 5th round, you're going to get undraftable players. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that this draft is relatively deep in most areas outside of like defensive tackle. And I mean, you're still going to get some high-end players, in my opinion, in the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. So I mean, just like every year, there's going to be players that teams take a stab at on day 3 that they don't pan out or they're undraftable players. But at the same time, you're going to find some players that they're going to be some real gems, just like any year.
All right, Harris wants to know, hey Andrew, what running back late round? Give us a couple late round running backs. I guess the Eagles, they did sign Jordan Howard. They have Boston Scott. They got the group of guys from last year, Adrian Killins and Holyfield. I think they're still hanging around. So a late round running back on your radar.
Yeah, Elijah Mitchell from Louisiana Lafayette. I had a chance to, when I covered the Sun Belt Conference a couple of years ago for Pro Football Network, that I really I've really been following their whole running back rotation for the past few seasons now, and he has very little tread on the tires. He goes about 5'11", 215, terrific contact balance, navigating through traffic. It doesn't have that home run breakaway speed, but he's going to grind out those tough yards. He's a better pass catcher than he's initially given credit for. He's not flashy or anything like that, but I think he'd be a good complement to Miles Sanders.
Yeah, Louis Riddick was on with Greeny the other day and said, there's a lot of gaps and a lot of lack of information in this draft that it's making it hard for front offices to really get a handle here. So do you anticipate with 11 picks that the Eagles would try to use some of those picks to get more picks in next year's draft? In other words, like, hey, we'll give you picks here if you give us a pick in next year's draft. Is get rid of some of the picks this year to add more next year?
Well, I mean, I kind of agree with that because the Eagles aren't necessarily in position right now to contend for anything, and it also gives a year for Nick Sirianni to assess what he has on the roster and the direction he wants to kind of head his franchise, and then you give your scouting department a little bit of a head start, knowing you have all this additional ammo and do some due diligence on a lot of these guys. So I think that, to a degree, I think that would be an interesting strategy.
You mentioned Christian Barmore earlier. A lot of people think this is a very thin defensive tackle class, but would you agree that Philly has to get one in this draft? You got Fletcher Cox aging, you got Javon Hargrave, who's been hurt, and after that, they're pretty thin. So is this a draft that they need to get one, and is it a thin class? Is there someone that they could have their eyes on?
Yeah, this is in all the years that I can recall. I think this is one of the more thin classes of defensive tackles that and next year, although it's a little early, next year doesn't look as much more promising either. As far as Christian Barmore, I mean, I think if they were to drop down to 15 or possibly 17, even down to there, he would be a good possibility. I mean, he's going to be the first and only defensive tackle to go in the first round this year. And after that, there's a big drop off. There's a lot of question marks for a lot of guys there. He's another guy that he had 1 year of production. He's freakishly athletic. He's 6'5", 310, moves really well, good pass rusher, disruptive. So if they're gonna get somebody that they expect to be, a long-term starter, he would be the guy. Other than that, I mean, I think that they do need to add one. I mean, the depth behind Hargrave and Fletcher Cox is abysmal, and they need to add a young tackle at least, maybe a rotational guy that you could find in the third or fourth round.
Yeah, I know that the old regime, that was a very important position. I'm interested, Jim Schwartz liked to rotate those guys. I'm interested to see if that's the case, or are you going to get, a much higher percentage of snaps from the two starters? I mean, we don't really know that.
That's what I think's going to happen. I think they're going to have, extensive mileage because of the lack of depth, because of their financial situations. I don't know how you can you can't sign away anybody. And I mean, with 11 picks, you might get a defensive tackle, but I don't know that it's going to be a starting caliber defensive tackle. It might be a young player who doesn't have a lot of experience, maybe like a Jalen Twyman from Pitt, who is best in a rotational situation, good pass rusher and everything. But I mean, otherwise, you're looking at the Eagles roster right now. You got T.Y. McGill and Raekwon Williams, and just guys that are fringe players that are hardly assured a roster spot.
All right, there we go. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. That was the fastest 20 minutes I think I've ever had in the books.
Me too, man.
Yeah, right. A lot of questions. If we didn't get to yours, don't worry. Andrew will be on next week. We got plenty more time to get more draft questions in, and then the draft is here on Thursday, and we'll have plenty of coverage on Thursday's show. Andrew DiCecco, and, of course, the Inside the Birds podcast. It dropped yesterday. They got plenty of draft coverage. Andrew will be a part of the Inside the Birds mock draft, and make sure you check out the new mock draft, Inside the Birds, Monday morning, 6 a.m., and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Andrew, last weekend before the players will actually be on rosters. How about that?
Yeah, how about that? Hey, I appreciate the questions, everyone. And Mike, have a great weekend, man.
You do the same. There he goes. Andrew DiCecco, great on the draft. Excellent insight, as always. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, when we come back, Paul Hudrick will join us. The Sixers lose last night. They've lost 3 in a row. The gap is closing in the East. Should we be worried? No Ben Simmons last night. Should be an interesting discussion. Bob Wankel coming up. Phillies conversation at the back end of the hour. Don't go away. All right, we're back here on a Sports Best Friday. Happy Hour Friday, everybody. Now I'm going to ask Paul Hudrick. It's Happy Hour Friday. What's his happy hour beverage of choice this weekend? He doesn't have the hat on. I thought he'd maybe go with a Cape May. We'll see. Looks like he got a big smile there for the cold one on a Friday here, bud. It is a Happy Hour Friday. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. And cold one sounds good. I will be definitely enjoying 1 or 2 or 5 of those at some point this weekend.
We're going to need one after what we saw the last 3 days, 3-game losing streak and the panic button out there. A lot of people after last night. Now, I think if you are a little bit more real with what you saw a team at the end of the line gassed a little bit against a team that was pretty fresh. But is that an excuse? If you're a championship team, do you figure out a way to compete in these games?
I don't look at it as an excuse, but I look at it as just the reality. Yes, if you're a champion, like you want to be a championship team, but you're also human beings. And the Milwaukee Bucks hadn't played a basketball game since Monday. Think about that. The last time the Milwaukee Bucks played, the Sixers were getting torched by Steph Curry, which feels like it was a month ago. And then in that time, the Sixers, played a really tough game against what I believe to be the most underrated team in the NBA, and the Suns took them down to the wire. Very short-handed, I might add, without Tobias, without Seth, without Ben Simmons. And then they have to go into Milwaukee the next night. They're plenty rested, and they still don't have Ben Simmons, which I think was a huge part of the reason why they lost. Not having, Doc said the reason he didn't want Joel Embiid on Giannis Antetokounmpo from the start is just the situation, the back-to-back, and how worn out Joel Embiid probably already was. Well, if you have Ben Simmons, that's not as big of a concern. Ben Simmons did a really nice job against Giannis last time for 3 quarters, and I thought he kind of ran out of gas because they were on a back-to-back that night too. So it just seems to keep happening with the Bucks. So I would say it's, of course, like, you want to win every game, like you never want to lose. But I think if you went into this game expecting to come out on fire and pull off this win, I think you were just kind of setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah, I want to kind of highlight Ben Simmons not being there, and we can get to it. Do you have any idea what's wrong with him at this point and what his prognosis is?
Yeah, Doc Rivers kind of hinted at it was like a stomach flu situation. So if that's the case, you get it from a couple different perspectives. You get it. One, if anyone's had the stomach flu, that generally puts you on your butt for a couple days. You got to worry about hydration levels. And then also, I think they were just worried about the team. Why would you want him near the team if he has the potential to spread something like that? You're already shorthanded. You already have had, your kind of COVID situation lurk for your team. Don't want something like that creeping up. And I think there's been something going around the league where you've seen a few guys showing up on the with an illness, non-COVID related. So I think it's a stomach illness, and I think it's just putting him on his butt for a few days here. And they just want to make sure that he is not. He's because we all have seen Ben. Like, if one thing you could say about Ben Simmons is he plays hard every single night. He plays a lot of minutes every single night. So I don't think they want to put him in a situation where he's not 100% healthy, and then they put him in a spot where whether it's just wearing him out or possibly getting hurt or whatever. So I think they just want to make sure he's 100%, and so hopefully he's there Saturday. Doc said he's 50-50, so we'll see.
By the way, Sixers fall to 5-6 without Ben Simmons. They're 9-9 without Joel Embiid. But watching them without Ben Simmons, you can almost make a case how important he is, because defensively they stink without him.
Yeah, it's a very fair point. And that's the one thing you got to listen. Joel Embiid is great. Joel Embiid deserves to be an MVP candidate. Without Joel Embiid, this team is not very good either. But when you look defensively, when they played well without Joel Embiid, they had that 7-3 stretch. Someone could check me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure over that stretch they were number 1 in the NBA in defensive rating, and that's without Joel Embiid. So clearly that's Ben Simmons leading that charge. The guy has been excellent defensively. As I mentioned, the last matchup against the Bucks, he held Giannis in check for 3 quarters. If you remember, the Sixers built out a huge lead, and part of that was Giannis really wasn't that effective. And then what I thought happened was the Sixers were coming off the back-to-back, and I think they had played a tough game against the Knicks the night before. You could just see in the fourth quarter they wore down. Ben Simmons was doing a great job fighting through screens early, which is something he's really good at. Just didn't have that much effectiveness in that category in the fourth quarter overtime and couldn't carry it over. But yeah, it's Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are the two best players on this team. There's no other real way to break it down. Joel Embiid is the most important offensively. Ben Simmons is the most important defensively. So if you take either of those guys out of the equation, it's going to hurt. And I just think, to your point, Mike, over the last couple of games, we have seen how big of a difference Ben Simmons makes. Even the detractors have to recognize how much of a difference he could have made over these last three.
You'd be surprised. Here is Paul Hudrick, the Sixers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com. And Paul, I thought at least Doc acknowledged, too, if this is a playoff game, we're playing Embiid on Antetokounmpo. We didn't play him there because it was a back-to-back, and Ben Simmons wasn't here. Simmons would have been, so the game would have looked a lot different. I think we can all understand that. I watched the game. I didn't see it live. I had to watch it this morning. The takeaway that I got from that game was not much, but I was happy to see Milton look like he had a little, I don't know, he was back to himself a little bit last night. And I don't know, is that he was tired, he hit the wall a little bit, or is he just an inconsistent player?
It's funny, like when you look at like his game logs, if you're on Basketball Reference, if you're like me, you're on there every day looking at stuff. It's like a stretch of all these games in double figures, like all these pretty good games, a couple of very good games mixed in with over, plus 20, near 30. And then there's like 2 games where he's single digits. And it seems like that's been his pattern, is a bunch of games that are pretty good with a couple of really good ones mixed in, a couple bad games and then back. But I think 2 things, Mike. I think every player is not great every night. That's just the reality. And bench players too, particularly, seem to be that way. But the good ones don't have prolonged slumps. And I think that's what we've seen out of Shake this year, is that when he has struggled, it's a game or two and he snaps out of it. Hopefully those games don't happen as often in the playoffs. You never know. But I think I'm more encouraged by the fact that after he seems to have games like this, he does typically bounce back. And it's funny, I think about it, and I said this to a colleague last night. If they got to Shake Milton from Milwaukee against Phoenix, they beat Phoenix. Because he was that good against Milwaukee. So, but listen, it's the way the league goes. It's ebbs and flows. Doc Rivers didn't want to panic either after the Phoenix game, after he had a couple rough nights. So it's just, I think it's partially ebbs and flows, partially bench players kind of tending to just be a little streaky.
Yeah, I know. I want to get your take on what we've seen. I know that people want to see George Hill and what they think of him. I think it's hard to get a handle on him because this isn't the role they envision him in. But still knocking the rust off, but give me a little synopsis, the Hudrick synopsis.
He's been solid. I think he's been what they thought. I think the one thing, he's been a little passive offensively, which is to be expected. New team, there's plenty of other options that they're kind of more go-to guys. So I think he has deferred a little bit more than maybe I would like to see going forward. But I just think that's him assimilating himself. I think defensively, you're seeing that he can be, listen, he's not an all-world defender. He's not Matisse Thybulle, but he is a good defender, a solid defender who can hang with guys, who has played tough assignments. I love his ball handling and what I think that could bring to the table. I'm really intrigued to see him in lineups with Ben Simmons, because we have not seen that yet. So I'm really interested to see what that looks like. Maybe get him and Ben Simmons in some pick and rolls, some triple handoff stuff. And there's just like, Mike, there's just so many little things he does that it's stuff that just won't show up in a box score. There was a play against Phoenix where he just had the ball in the wing and Joel Embiid was jockeying for position. And you just saw the patience of George Hill just looking around the court, waiting. And then finally he saw Joel Embiid open for a split second and found him, and Joel Embiid got fouled. And then the other play against Phoenix at the end of the third quarter, where time was winding down to end the quarter. And I'm like, man, is this guy going to get going or what? He hits it and he gets fouled at the last second. I think that veteran presence, those little things that he does, those nuances in the game that don't show up in box scores, that maybe aren't, mind-boggling things, but that will help a young team to have a guy like that is playoff tested and does do those little things.
Yeah, I know that the frustrating thing, I guess, for me anyway, I mean, obviously I get it, but I don't anticipate that this is the role that he will be in. I would imagine, I guess you'll see him with Simmons, right? They haven't played together in a game yet. Simmons hasn't been back, so you'll probably see him complement Simmons in some, but also allow Milton to not have to, handle the ball so much. We haven't got to see Hill in his true form. So that's something. Harris back last night. What'd you think there? I mean, is this something that they're worried about, or was this just, hey, give him a couple nights off so that he's ready to go for the stretch run?
So he missed a couple games a little while back with a bone bruise in that same knee. So I would assume, I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like he was trying to play through it. They realized, hey, the only way this is going to get better is if he just rests. So I think that was the point of that was, let's get this guy healthy now. Let's get him 100% now so that we have him for the stretch run. We have him for the playoffs. He said last night, he told us he's pain-free. He said he felt good health-wise last night. No issues with the knee at all. Said it was just a matter of getting his rhythm back, which you saw. He was rusty early, didn't quite look like himself. But that when they made that run in the third quarter, he looked really good. So I'm certainly not worried about him long-term. I think if anything, he just, like I said, I think the only way that was going to heal was rest. So, and I think he was trying, because of the kind of guy he is, the kind of type of player he is, he's been so durable throughout his career. I think he was just trying to play through it. And they realized, that's not the smart move. Smart move is sit now. It's a tough stretch to sit, but he had to do it. And now I think it's going to be worth it because now he's 100%. So now you have him for this game Saturday in Milwaukee, and you'll have him for the last few games where you can maybe try to separate yourself a little bit as the one seed.
Well, they need it because with Milwaukee's win last night, you got a game and a half separating the top three teams in the East, right? I mean, so this game on Saturday, it's getting tight up there, man.
Listen, I want to say this.
It was 4.5 on Wednesday.
Right. It's big. It's a big game. If they win, it's huge. If Milwaukee wins, it's huge for Milwaukee. What I would say for Sixers fans, though, is if they wind up not winning, they still are in a really good spot to still take that one seed because over the last stretch, that schedule is just not nearly as tough. They play 3 home games coming up, I believe, right after that Milwaukee game. The remainder of their opponents aren't nearly as strong. And look, Mike, before they started this 7-game stretch with that game in Dallas, and we all agreed that was if not the worst stretch of the season, one of the most brutal stretches. Either that or that 6-game roadie was also very tough.
Yeah.
But listen, they have a chance if they win Saturday to go 4-3 on their toughest stretch of the season, and that's with multiple guys in and out of the lineup and them being banged up. So if they manage to do that, first of all, that's pretty darn impressive. And second of all, they're in pretty good shape. As I mentioned, as the schedule is going to get softer, as they're going to get healthier, Ben Simmons is an illness. He'll be back. It's not like this is something that's going to keep him out for the season or like a lingering injury. He will be back. I think Joel Embiid has looked very good. I think he looks healthy. Seth Curry, I think, has been a little up and down. Hopefully he kind of gets righted. And the more George Hill gets assimilated, I think they're in a very good place. Would you prefer to win Saturday? Of course, and it would be big. But at the same time, I don't think if they lose, it's this catastrophe. I think they still have everything they want is still right in front of them if they lose.
Simmons is 50-50. You get a win without Simmons in Milwaukee. I'll shake my hand. You'll get a handshake. Good job. But you got to keep it going. Of course, Paul Hudrick at Paul Hudrick, a big game tomorrow night, and then Oklahoma City on Monday. By the way, check out that article that Jay Blevins wrote, 40 before 20. They didn't get it. They had 3 chances to get there. They didn't get it. 20 came before 40. They are 39 and 20. What does 40 before 20 mean? Go read that piece from Jay Blevins over at 97.3ESPN.com. All right, Paul, we'll talk to you Monday, man.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks, man.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk on the hotline. Get yourself a cold one. It's happy hour Friday. All right, man. When we come back, Bob Wankel talks Phils here as they get ready for Colorado. The lineup is out. Let me give you the lineup real fast before Bob jumps on so we can tell. Velasquez is pitching, by the way. McCutchen, Hoskins, Harper, Real Muto, Gregorius, Bohm, Miller, Moniak. Sounds like offense. PT.
MG, how are you, buddy? One, two, 1, 2, 3. MG. I can see it. Can you see me?
A happy hour Friday of the Sports Bash starts right now. Well, it doesn't start now. It's the final hour. And the Sports Bash live on a happy hour Friday. Pete Thompson is in the house. There he is, smiling away, ready to go. Happy hour Friday here on the Sports Bash. This hour brought to you by Jenkins. Call Jenkins for heating and air conditioning installation service and maintenance, plumbing, drain service, 609-641-6440, JenkinsPlumbingHeating.com. I'm Mike Gill. There's the PT. He's here for a happy hour Friday. We'll have a little fun on the Friday. Jeff Kerr joins me at 5:25 tonight. Peter?
Michael, how are you? I can hear you. You can hear me. This is a wonderful thing.
Yes, we are simpatico on a Friday.
Where do I begin? My goodness, there's so much going on.
Well, shall we begin? Yeah, draft. We haven't talked a lot of draft. I feel like our conversations, we've been in recently have centered around how bad the Flyers turned and then some Phillies stuff as we kind of got into that. But the draft, so much to kind of unpack with this draft situation. The Eagles are sitting at 12, and I had this thought at 12, and I was kind of this and that. And then all this week we started as we talked to more draft and got more information, I got to be honest with you. I really think they're going to move back and take an offensive lineman.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised, because again, and
like
then
that or no?
Do I like it as a fan? No. As somebody that understands they need as many assets as possible, yes. I mean, it's the Hinkie-esque move, right? Yeah, the trade that they did to move back originally is looking better and better as we get moving along.
I saw a tweet today from Jeff Schwartz, who played offensive line in the NFL.
I like that guy. I follow him too. May the Schwartz be with you. Yes.
Well, I don't know if you saw his tweet, but his tweet essentially was backing that whole situation. And he said, 2017 Eagles, best offensive line in football. 2018 Patriots, dominated offensive line, dominated in the playoffs. 2019 Chiefs, Pro Bowl left tackle, all pro right tackle. Buccaneers, all pro caliber guard, center, and right tackle. He says, I'd make sure my offensive line is set before drafting a receiver. That's just me. And I tweeted back, Howie Roseman knows this. They have built the lines, and that's the one area in the draft where you say, he's been horrible. No, he's been horrible at wide receiver and corner. But they have gotten it right on the offensive line and the defensive line for the most part.
Yeah, I'm looking at his tweet right now, and I knew I liked him for a reason. Those offensive line, whether it's Baldinger, whether it's Schwartz, whether it's Schlereth, we always like to say these are the big, smelly, stinky guys on the line, and they don't know anything. And guess what? They're pretty damn perceptive, aren't they, Mike Gill?
They are. It's funny because so my girlfriend's son, every time Pete Thompson's name comes up or that he comes to our house, he'll say, hey, I'll say, hey, there's, you know Pete Thompson. He'll say, is he a football player? Why? Because he's smelly and stinky.
I am not smelly and stinky. Be quiet. You know my line about football that I say that people say, did I play football in high school? And I tell them I was at every game. And then I wait and see if they'll actually push the issue.
Right. And Pete was at every game.
Do you remember why I was at every game?
You were in the band.
Yes, I was in the marching band. I played a horn.
Right. So let me at number so would you prefer stay at 12 and get the best guy there, or add more assets and be comfortable? Like, I'm more comfortable if they take an offensive lineman if it's at 15 with the trade with the Patriots, 20 trade with the Bears, 19 trade with Washington.
Right, and it has to be the right price if they're going to sorry to interrupt, but if they're going to trade with the Bears, then you got to get a first back. Like, if the Bears want to move up and get a quarterback, then none of this second or high second or any of that. No. You want to move. If the Eagles are going to move down again, it better be for the right price.
I agree. Right. And I said on Thursday's show, if the Bears call you and want to go from 20 up to 12, you got to demand a first round pick. You've got to say, look. And I said, I would keep throwing back in their face. Your quarterback is Andy Dalton. You want to move up? You got to give me a first-round pick. Your quarterback's Andy Dalton. You can be fine with that. If you're okay with that, fine. But if you don't want Andy Dalton, you can have 12, but I want your first-round pick next year.
Yeah, and Howie has a history of that, right? I think I heard a little of that conversation you were having when Sam Bradford, the way that they shipped Bradford out.
Not a first-round pick.
Yep. I mean, that's the thing. When it gets closer to the draft and teams get a little tight in the shorts, and you're getting a little knee knocking, that's the best time to wheel and deal.
Now, Sal Pal was on with me earlier today. He said something kind of interesting, Peter. I want you to kind of react to this. And the thing that he said, now, I'm not shocked, because I've been saying this for a while, but what he said was, the feeling he gets from people he talks to in the NovaCare complex is, one, the Eagles feel they can compete this year, that they're not that far away. And two, they want to compete this year, but without taking shortcuts. And he said the translation, build from the inside out, because that's their model of success. Their best offensive line, they won a Super Bowl. Their best defensive line, strip sack, win the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So people in that building think that they're not far away. And I have said the same thing. The question is, were they a 4-win? Remember, Vegas last year said they were a 10-win team. That was the over-under.
Yeah.
They won 4 games. Was it a 4-win season because they were a bad roster and they were a bad football team? Or did the injuries have something to do with that?
I mean, the injuries had a lot to do with it, but I think you have to factor both of that in. I mean, I can see why the Eagles would subscribe to the theory of saying we're not that far away. I can also see why national media and a lot of the fan base says, are you kidding me? You won 4 games and you've got problems up and down the roster. So I definitely see both sides of it. I would lean a little bit more toward what you are saying, which is that, if they were just able to keep one offensive line, the offensive line shifted so many times. It felt like every week we were talking about, and this is the 5th combination in 5 games. This is the 6th. They just couldn't.
They ended up with 13.
Yeah, it was brutal. How many? And then I did hear Sal Pal on with you earlier. If Carson Wentz is just half as bad and half as mediocre as he was. I mean, when your name is being mentioned in the same name as like dog dirt quarterbacks that nobody would ever draft in fantasy football or any football for that matter, Carson Wentz was awful. He was near the bottom of the league in several statistical categories. And they waited so long to finally bench him that it ultimately affected the team.
Yeah, there's no question. Now, let me ask you about this then. You mentioned, they have so many holes that they need to fill. And I don't disagree with that, but, you got Lane Johnson coming back, hopefully healthy, ready to play. You've got Brandon Brooks, healthy, back, hopefully ready to play. Jason Kelsey, Isaac Seumalo, and then Dillard and Mailata will battle for left tackle. So do you see, if you draft a guy at 12 or somewhere else, do you see a guy playing on that offensive line immediately?
I mean, it depends who the offensive lineman is that you pick, you know. And here's the thing.
Does it though?
Right.
Which one of those guys are you sitting Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey?
No, the only reason that I'm saying that they might not be available is I'm not 100% ready to just pencil them in. You know, Lane Johnson, though, I don't know about you. Have you ever had any foot issues? Yeah, because you said your feet hurt, right? You know, anything that has to do with the feet and the ankle, you know, I always have pause on that. I always think like, you know, I mean, look, use the baseball analogy. When Ryan Howard had his ankle issues, he was never the same player again. I'm not saying Lane Johnson is that bad, but Lane Johnson certainly was never 100% last year. And where's the guarantee that he's going to be the Lane Johnson that you remember? I mean, he's not getting any younger. What is he, 30, 31, right? That's the time when Joe Banner used to ship people out. Here we are counting on him to be a solid starter and to contribute, you know. Brandon Brooks, his issues were, you know, I mean, the poor guy can't catch a break. So you get the Brandon Brooks of old. All right, I'm willing to subscribe to that. But even Jason Kelsey, and I know they think that Sayamalu could be the center if Jason Kelsey can't, and they're sort of maybe grooming him to be in that position. But the team with Jason Kelsey on the field is entirely different than when he's not on the field. He's that important a position.
Yeah, that's definitely accurate. And I thought the Sayamala stuff was very intriguing because they said, look, we don't have to draft for a center or a guard because we can play Sayamala. If we draft a center, we'll play Sayamala guard. If we draft a guard, we can move Sayamala to center. So they feel comfortable with him. But they also really zoned in on the ability to wear multiple hats for guys like Rashawn Slater in this draft and Ali Vera Tucker. Those are two first-round players who can play guard and tackle. And Mosher has even said he's had scouts tell him that Slater could play center if they needed him in this league. So that, to me, widened my eyes to trading back and just saying, hey, we'll take the safe pick. We'll go with one of the linemen.
Right. And where do they trade back to, and who's the dance partner that they trade back with, and who do they get, and what do they get back in return? I mean, those are all the big question marks. What team are they trading with?
The trade that I saw was, you know, as a proposal.
Sure.
Yeah. Was to move back from 12 to 15 with New England, and New England would give up their second round pick to do that.
Okay, now here we just barked about the fact that if you're going to trade with the Bears, then you have to get a first-round pick to do it.
You're going from 12 to 15 as opposed to 12 to 20 with the Bears.
Yeah, that's quite a bit different. I mean, listen, do you trust the Patriots not to get the best of you? I mean, and let me ask you this. You're just talking about the linemen there and giving a couple great linemen that are eligible in the draft this year and could almost, you don't want to say plug and play, but pretty damn close, right? What do you think the fan base reaction would be to a team that traded down to begin with and then trades down again to get a lineman? What do you think that reaction's going to be?
No, not good. I said, if that happens, you're going to get booze. I said, picture this scenario, Pete Thompson. This draft is not in Cleveland. It's on the Art Steps. And the Eagles with the 15th pick trade back and take Ali Vera Tucker. The roof would blow off of
That's correct.
The place that we were in at the Art Museum that day. I mean,
yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Any Eagle fan wants another offensive lineman, even though they acknowledge that they might need them. Here's the thing, though. Adam Kaplan was on yesterday with us.
All right.
He said this, and I thought this was very interesting, Pete. Listen to what he said, and then think about an offensive lineman and the conversation we just had.
The draft is not about this season. It's not like, okay, we're going to draft just for this year's roster and then cut the whole team. No, folks, it's the future. Free agency, as general managers have told me over the years, it's about right now and maybe a year after. The draft is down the line, and hopefully you get some help out of it this year, but it's really about down the line.
So keep that in mind when they make a pick. If they take an offensive lineman, and you just listen to me and Pete having this conversation, well, they're not going to play him over Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey, Isaac Sayamala. You know, and I mean, here's the thing. They're not playing Rashawn Slater or Ali Vera Tucker. I don't think at left tackle.
Right.
Maybe they do, but think about that conversation that we're having, and then what Adam Kaplan just said. They're not looking to say, I need a guy at 15 and he has to play today. This is a pick for 10 years.
Right. And then I see names pop up like Landon Dickerson, you know, the guy's 6'5", 333 pounds, you know, a guy that can play guard and center and could be on the radar. I mean, that's the thing is you have to sit there and think like it's easy to throw out Jason Kelsey and Brandon Brooks' name and pencil them in, but it's not as easy to admit that those guys aren't going to be around forever. And you know, the Vera Tucker, Slater, Mayfield, the Michigan kid, Penei Sewell, of course, that'll be a dream, right? If you get Penei Sewell, I mean, that's a no-brainer, but you think he's probably going to go to Cincinnati, right, in most mock drafts.
Well, at number 6, I had no interest in Penei Sewell for the reasons that I've outlined. I don't think that this team this year, and I have the same mentality as they have, Pete. I don't think they're as bad as a 4-win team. The division, and by the way, the schedule comes out May 12th, but we know the opponents, and we know that 11 of their opponents did not make the playoffs last year. So they
right. That's a good point. Strength of schedule is pretty weak. You know, they have the opportunity. One team's 4-win season, the next season can go. And that was the greatest thing I thought Sal Pal said is 7 wins won the division, right? I mean, can you squeeze out 3 wins somewhere? Can you squeeze out a couple more wins somewhere?
Well, and he said, would you have squeezed out a couple more wins even in the condition that you were in last year if your quarterback just played competent?
Right. And aren't you of the camp that I am, which is that those guys, the Jack Driscolls of the world, the Nate Herbicks of the world, they never were supposed to play that many plays. That was like the in case of emergency, throw these guys in. And pretty soon, like week after week, they were in the starting lineup and they were moving around on the line. And I mean, that's absolutely almost a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before. I think Driscoll's a nice player. I think Herbig's a nice player singularly. Like if I said you have Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey, Isaac Seumalo, and your left tackle, whoever that may be, and Driscoll's playing right tackle, and they play all 16 games together, Driscoll's fine. If 1 week he plays right tackle and his left guard is Herbig, and the next week he plays right tackle and his right guard is Pryor, and the next week he plays right tackle and he's got another guy next to him, then he's going to struggle. He's not talented enough to have a different dance partner next to him all the time. He needs the same dance partner. You know, if he was just dancing with the stars, he needs the same partner and he can dance. If you give him a different guy, partner next to him every time, those dance moves look a little shaky.
Yeah, what are they going to do with Andre Dillard?
Great question, man. I mean, I guess he battles for the position.
It sounds like you're pretty high on Mailata. I mean, you think Mailata's going to beat out the first rounder, Dillard?
From what I've seen, I mean, Mailata, put it this way, Mailata, if he plays college football for 4 years, at 6'8", 350 pounds, and he had some training, he's probably a first-round pick with that size and agility and athletic ability. But because he never played a snap of football in his life and still has outperformed, Pro Football Focus ranked him as a top 15 left tackle last year.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. The project, what became a project is now definitely a serviceable NFL lineman and could end up being a more than serviceable, AKA almost, dare I say it, Pro Bowler.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know a lot of people, don't know what to. I think to me, he reminds me, I kind of compared him to Joel Embiid. The size and athleticism and strength that he has, but the limited background in the sport, I think we're only going to see this guy continue to get better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I thought that was a great analogy. I think I heard when you said that the other day, and I thought, I was nodding my head. A lot of times when I'm in the car, I'm driving, I'm either thinking of my students who are listening. Some of them are listening right now, so don't make me look bad. But yeah, I'm either thinking of them and what the lesson plan is going to be for the next day, or I'm thinking, boy, Gill's actually making sense today. This sounds good.
You say that a lot, it sounds like.
In the car. I don't tell it to you because, your head's already big enough.
Yeah, exactly.
It's filling the whole frame.
All right. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. All right. So on Tuesday's show, you callously mocked people for going to the Flyers game.
That is correct.
That's why I saved 4-pack of tickets for the Flyers game for this Sunday to give away right now. How about that?
All right, good. They're playing the Devils. So you got a chance to see a win. Absolutely.
They are playing on Sunday against the Devils, and we are sending you there 4-packs of tickets right now. Now, you kind of gave away what I was going to do.
Which is?
I was going to say to text in their opponent, but you just gave it away.
Oh, sorry. Well, maybe you got to set this stuff up with me ahead of time. I'm a blurter. I blurt things out.
Yeah, never tell a secret to Pete Thompson that you want kept.
That's true. That's very much true.
All right. So if you want to go to the Flyers game on,
come up with something different about them.
I will right on the fly here. If you want to go to the Flyers game on Sunday, this Sunday, a family 4-pack. We have 4-packs. Send us a text 609-403-0950. 0973 and use the hashtag Flyers. The first 4 people that do so, you will get a 4-pack of tickets to the game on Sunday. Bang. 4-pack of tickets, 4-packs. So the first 4 texts, hashtag Flyers. That's all you need to text in. Hashtag Flyers. First 4 people that do it, 609-403-0973. And you can get that 4-pack of tickets. We will email you the tickets, and you will head up to the Flyers game against the Devils. And they won the other night. They beat the Rangers.
They did, and they play again tonight. And they got a rookie going in the lineup, too. I know all this because I follow Kevin Durso on Twitter.
Alex Lyon is in goal tonight, right?
Yeah, that's a little crazy, right? I mean, there's a lot of things. Listen, this is, the Flyers haven't officially run up the white flag yet, but Jackson Cates will be on the 4th line in between Lindblom and Nick Aube-Kubel. And then, Alex Lyon. You know the last time Alex Lyon won a game, Mike Gill?
No.
March 17th of 2018.
Jeez.
Yeah. The last time Alex Lyon won a game, Valerie Filppula.
Val
Filppula was in the lineup when Alex Lyon won an NHL game.
All right,
Good luck there, Alex.
By the way, Coaches versus Cancer baseball tournament, it's underway. We have the games. You can watch them on our website right now. Eustis is beating Ocean City 2-0. Great pitching matchup. Noonan is pitching Matt Noonan for Ocean City, and there's scouts, everywhere. The place is flooded over there at Summers Point. And we'll have the late game on our website, 97.3ESPN.com. Mainland is playing Cherokee. That's at 7:30. And I'll be calling that game with Sully, Dave O'Sullivan. So
nice.
We'll be checking that out tonight. If you want to watch those games, if you can't get to Summers Point, you can watch the games on our website. But right now, the game is in the 4th. It's 2-0 Bishop Eustis over Ocean City. All right, Peter.
Michael. Good talking to you, buddy.
By the way, you'll hear PT on the Locker Room on Sunday.
Yes, I'm co-hosting or co-producing or whatever the hell my role is. What am I called again?
You are the shotgun rider.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm the caddy. I'm Billy Schweim's caddy. He's gonna ask for the driver, and I'm gonna try to get him to hit the 3-wood.
What do you call it? The unfortunate one. That's what you call it.
Yeah, I drew the short straw, but I'll be there Sunday
morning. It's like an old CPR song. You're not the fortunate son. You are the unfortunate son.
Absolutely. All right, have fun at the baseball.
I certainly will. I appreciate that. All right, coming up on the other side, Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, going to talk a little football with us. There was a trade today in the NFL. First-round pick got moved. We got the details coming up next here on the Sports Bash. 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, 555 Sports Bash Cash. All right, Jeff Kerr's in the house. We talk NFL Monday, Wednesday, Friday at this time. Jeff Kerr's here from CBS Sports, and he, like all guests, appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We had a trade in the NFL today. We got smoke screens. We got a lot to dissect on a Friday. Normally, we're getting ready for the weekend, but we got some stuff to get our hands dirty with here, Jeff. What's going on, man, as we bring you into a happy hour Friday? What's up, my man?
Boy, Mike, I went from Brett Veach pretty much saying that they're looking at offensive tackles on the trade market to probably having a deal in the works on his cell phone while he was talking to us this afternoon. So I thought that was pretty cool.
All right, so he gets this trade in the works. They end up trading a first-round pick to get a Pro Bowl tackle. This isn't like they got a stiff here, but like, what's the message there? They didn't like the tackles in this draft. How do you read this?
So this is, per Veach's words, it was they just didn't want to commit to signing a free agent that they didn't feel they could get someone better on the trade market. And I think as the draft got closer, they were looking at their potential options here. Do we really want to draft a rookie at 31 here to protect Patrick Mahomes, or do we want to get an established veteran? And look, there were guys available. Like, they could have Alejandro Villanueva for pretty much nothing. But I think the Ravens are going to eventually sign him to basically play right tackle in for Orlando Brown now that he's on Kansas City. But they wanted Trent Williams in the worst way. They wanted him more than Joe Thuney. They weren't able to get Trent Williams, so they went back to the drawing board. So I think they just were cautiously optimistic, looked at all their options, said, hey, look, we got drafted on at 31, we'll draft one. But really all you did was trade. Essentially, you drafted Orlando Brown, a two-time Pro Bowler who's 25 years old with the number 31 pick.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a terrible idea because of what they saw last year and how their window is now. I mean, we need a guy who can block now today instead of drafting a guy. Is he that much of a drop-off, though, from Alexander Villanueva and gone that route? I don't know, but it's interesting because now Baltimore ends up with 2 first-round picks at the back end of the draft here. They become a very interesting story on draft day.
You're Baltimore. You got to pick 2 wide receivers at 27 and 31, right? You got to help out Lamar Jackson. I mean, they're probably going to go after an offensive lineman too because, Ryan Stanley's coming back, but he's coming off that major injury, but you paid him a lot of money. But, even if you do sign Villanueva, I should say, you still got to add somebody in there. I don't think Villanueva is the long-term answer there, but for 2021 he is. So, you sign him, you draft, maybe a Taven Jenkins or someone like that. I'm assuming they're going to be there at 27 or 31. But I'm thinking, look, Kadarius Toney, Terrence Marshall, Bateman, someone like that. That's who you go with these 2 late first-round picks. I think that's what Baltimore was looking at. Look, we're going to trade a stud offensive tackle, even though he's young, but we need to get Lamar some help.
Yeah, and Rashad Bateman's deep there in the draft as well. So, obviously, Baltimore, I think, is a team that's very interesting. That whole Central Division, I mean, obviously Pittsburgh always seemingly in play, disappointing last year, but Cleveland's gotten much better. We'll see what happens with the Bengals. I mean, they're at 5. They see everything that's going on in this division right now. Do they want to try to keep up with everybody and get another weapon, or do they make the safe pick at number 5 and go Penei Sewell? I find them to be very interesting, but that division today with Baltimore and Pittsburgh always going at it, and Cleveland is now kind of everybody's chasing them. So I found that division got pretty interesting today.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, judging by my Twitter feed, it got pretty interesting when I put out an obscure Baker Mayfield stat, and Ravens fans were like, oh, but he's no Lamar, and, we got him at 32, and, it just went back and forth. Oh, Baker's been to as far in the playoffs as Lamar has. I'm like, I love the AFC North. That division, they're just full of rivals there. But, yeah, you're right, Mike. It all depends what Pittsburgh's going to do. I have a feeling Pittsburgh should probably go defense, but they're going to need help, too. Like, Juju's only there for 1 year. They need help at running back. I would assume a guy like Najee Harris is going to be there for them at 24, but do you draft a running back that high, or, what do you do in that situation? That's what I'm curious to see what Pittsburgh does, or, maybe they trade up, maybe they could also trade back too and acquire more picks. But really, I feel like now Baltimore controls that whole back half of the first round because they got those 2 picks.
Now, this is an interesting point that one of our viewers just brought up. Hypothetical, if the Eagles lost to the Bengals instead of tying them, they would have had the 5th pick.
Yes.
Would they then have traded back?
You know what? I don't think they trade back at 5 because I think they're a little scared that the Bengals might ruin this whole draft for them and draft Jamar Chase at 5. And I've talked to I actually had an interview with Devon Still yesterday. We were talking about who do you get? Do you get the stud wide receiver in Jamar Chase? Do you get Kyle Pitts, or do you get Penei Sewell? He goes, you got to protect that quarterback. You got to draft Penei Sewell. But again, I also said to him, we don't know what the Bengals are going to do here. He said, I know, that's what's scary about it.
Did you see Jeff Schwartz tweet today about the offensive line?
I did, yes.
Right, and I'm thinking, if you're the Bengals, you got your quarterback already. Like, you don't have to have these absolute stud wide receivers. And like the point, like that, you know, the Eagles won the Super Bowl with the best offensive line in the league. Their receivers were just like Alshon Jeffrey was a good, solid guy. You wouldn't say
Smith was a guy. Like, they replaced him.
So I mean, if I'm the Bengals, there's no way I pass up on the offensive lineman if he's there, especially after I just drafted a quarterback who got lost half the season because of an ACL injury.
Yeah,
but
and that's what
the Eagles were at 5. I think they still trade back because they could have got Pitts or Chase at 6, and they traded back.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I actually think the Eagles could trade up and get Chase or Pitts. I mean, really, there's 2 teams that are going to determine the Eagles draft. It's the Cincinnati Bengals and it's the Miami Dolphins. I think the Dolphins, if they have a choice between Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase at 6, that's actually no matter who they get, I think the Eagles should trade up and just get whoever the Dolphins don't pick. And I mean, I think that's a dream scenario for Miami because I honestly think Miami's going to draft Jamar Chase no matter what. But if Kyle Pitts is on the board, he's the second best player in this draft. You got to take him. I know they got Mike Gill, but you can have 2 tight ends there. But Brian Flores wants to run with that offense. That'd be perfect for them. So Jamar Chase is at 7. You got to think if you're the Eagles here, man, we got to find a way to trade Detroit, or we got to find a way to get to 8.
Yeah, that Mike Gill, who, by the way, is from our area here, just a freak athlete, by the way. The guy,
I saw him at Penn State. He was incredible there.
Yeah, and in high school here, you should have saw him play basketball and volleyball, by the way. I mean, he was unbelievable. But you could have your setup of your Gronk and Aaron Hernandez with those 2 guys and run the offense that the Patriots ran. Why? Oh, by the way, Brian Flores was a Patriot coach. But if Pitts fell past 6 and starts to get into 7, 8, 9, I find it to be fascinating because of the Dallas murmurs that they're, infatuated with him. And he's one guy that if I think gets to 7, 8, or 9, which I don't know, but I think Philly may say, all right, I'll jump back up and try to get back and play there.
And you're not going to give up much to do it. What do you give up? A 3rd-round pick to move up? Maybe a 6? Okay, like you got 11 picks in this draft, and really after the 4th round, there's not much to brag about in terms of draft picks.
No. Let me get your pick your brain on this. If Chicago's at 20 and wants to go to 12, Eagles can get another 1st-round pick?
I think I do it. I mean, if they do that, you're thinking, okay, maybe Rashad Bateman if you want to go wide receiver. Maybe you're thinking Greg Newsome. Or here's a crazy one for you. All of a sudden, Elijah Vera Tucker's in play.
Well, that's my thought is you move back to 15 with the Patriots. If they want the quarterback, or you go back to 20 with the Bears, now you're looking at Rashawn Slater maybe at 15, Vera Tucker at 20. What about even Caleb Farley if he starts falling down because of the back problems?
He's the biggest enigma in this draft. I feel like he is just as good as J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, but we don't know where he's going to go. He could go pick 31 or pick 32. Like, I could see the Ravens taking him if he's at 27 just because they can and they know how to draft defensive players.
Well, and Louis Riddick tweeted this out about an hour ago. He said a lot of gaps / missing information on many players in this draft that is making it very difficult for decision makers to feel certain about selecting them. What a wild ride we are on for this draft. Anticipate more trades, attempts to trade involving giving up picks in 2021 and trying to get picks for 2022 and beyond once we get into the 3rd round and onward. Because you got a guy like Gregory Rousseau who didn't play last year because of COVID. He opted out. He could be there at 12, 15, 20 in that range there. So the lack of information makes this thing a bigger crapshoot than ever before.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, it made sense when Jamar Chase and Micah Parsons opted out. They knew at the very worst they were going to be a top 10 pick. And then Micah Parsons falls to 12 to the Eagles. Hallelujah. But again, it's not like Gregory Rousseau. You just don't know where he was going to fall in this draft. But by the way, Mike, here's an interesting one for you. Travis Etienne is in Philly. I'm a little interested about that one. Like, I saw on his Instagram story,
that's not a 1st-round pick, though, right?
Yeah, well, no, you don't pick him in the 1st round, but at 37, if he's there, you never know. Like, have someone to back up Miles Sanders. You can't, if you have a 1-2 punch and Nick Sirianni likes to run the football, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So this is interesting because you just mentioned 37. I find the Eagles 37, plus they have the 2 second-round picks. I don't remember the numbers, but one of them, your own, is better than the Colt one. All 3 of those picks, 37 and the 2 third-round picks, I find to be very intriguing about moving up and going to get guys who are falling in. Like, I feel there's a huge opportunity to get back into the first round because they have 3 picks between 37 and I think it's 80.
Yeah, I think it's like 67. I think they're the 2 picks. If I'm not mistaken, I would have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure the Colts pick is 8. But yeah, that's the other thing. You have that 3rd round pick to play with. So if you trade up in this draft, that's the other reason why I look at trading up. Okay, so you have some other draft capital there. Do you really need 2 3rd round picks? It's not like you have 2 second round picks like the year you drafted Miles Sanders and JJ Arcega-Whiteside and you keep them. You have some draft capital there that you can afford to use. So that's why I keep thinking they're going to move up, because the defensive talent in the 3rd round, really any of the talent in the 3rd round, isn't like the 3rd round talent before, because we're bringing back the whole Gregory Rosso thing.
Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, covers the NFL. Sal Pal was on with me earlier. He's and said, the feeling I get from people I talk to in the NovaCare is, 1, they feel they can compete in the division this year. They're not that far away. And 2, they want to compete this year, but they don't want to take shortcuts. So they don't want to get like, a free agent, a Band-Aid. They want to do it with the guys that are here, but they feel like, in other words, getting the offensive line back. We feel like the quarterback play is going to be more competent.
So Jalen Hurts is a starter, right?
There's no question about that. Come on. And I thought the comment Roseman made on Wednesday plays with that comment is, we took players in the draft last year and the year before, and we didn't think the coaching staff got enough out of them.
That's what it sounded like. They threw Doug Pearson, Jim Schwartz under the bus a little bit. Like, we took players that we felt were good. And look, I think this is their last lifeline in the sense, like, okay, we hired this football guy. We hired this guy that's going to maximize the talent that we have. Look, I never thought Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas were that bad. I used to make jokes about how they were dead weight, but they also weren't developed that well either. Like, so say you get Avonte Max of 2018. Remember how good he was his rookie year, and then he kind of declined. Say you get the most out of him. Say you get the most out of a guy like Darius Slay, Anthony Harris, Eric Wilson, for example. All of a sudden, you have a pretty solid defense. It's not like the greatest defense in the world, but you're trusting your coach and his staff and Jonathan Gannon there that your defense is going to be better and that can stop the Cowboys, or your offensive line's healthy enough, or you could stop the Redskins front 7. So you're looking at that, and look, the winner of the NFC East was 7-9 last year. Let's not kid ourselves. Like, as bad as the Eagles were, they weren't that far away. Dallas should win this division easily.
Yeah, don't you think though that the East has the arrow pointing up on almost
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Washington's defense is a legit playoff defense. Heck, they almost beat the Super Bowl champions.
They were the one team that gave Tampa Bay probably their toughest game of the year.
Right, because they could rush the passer.
Yeah, and that's why I think Washington's going to be very dangerous. And look, the Giants, it all depends on how well Daniel Jones does. If Daniel Jones is bad, they're just not going to be a good football team. Dallas got Prescott back. Yeah, the division is trending upwards. And look, they're not playing these world. I think them playing the AFC East might knock the AFC West. Sorry, might knock them down a bit, because you're going to play the Chiefs, who are pretty good. You're going to play the Chargers, who I think are going to be pretty good. The Raiders, who knows what they're going to be, but they're usually around 500 regardless. And look, Denver, if they get a quarterback, they're going to be good. So those are going to be tough games. And so again, and also their 17th game is the AFC East. So yeah, it feels like the NFC East team is going to be better, but it still feels like the division winner is going to be 9-8.
Quite possible. I mean, Dallas is interesting. You get Prescott back. They would have probably won 10 games with him last year had he not got hurt.
They need a defense.
Their defense is terrible. I think the Giants are sneaky with their building over there, because everybody kind of just keeps looking at them and Jones, but I feel like they're trying to build a team where Jones doesn't have to do a lot. So I think this division is going to be very intriguing, and you add to the mix that they pick 10, 11, and 12. on draft night. All right, Jeff
Why
Kerr.
you jumping?
Yeah, there you go. CBS Sports NFL writer. We will continue to talk NFL next week. Jeff will be back on Monday. We'll look at more getting ready for the draft, off-season stuff, and we'll do it all off-season through the football season as, of course, the Eagles pick number 12. And who knows, maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe they move up. We'll have to unpack that next week. Jeff, have a good weekend, man.
Yep, you too, Mike. One more week.
I don't know if I like that or not. I love the conversation. I love the speculation. Jeff Kerr, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, when we come back, we got plenty more to finish up here. We have the sounds of the day, the guest of the week, and, of course, game night tonight. Who's on game night tonight? Kevin Durso previews tonight's Flyers game as we have that game on 97.3 ESPN. And we've got the 4-pack winners. I'll tell you who they were coming up next. Don't go away. All right, 5-question time now to get ready to wrap up the show. What's going on Mike Gill? Josh has got his sound of the day. These are the bites that interest him the most. But just because they interest him the most doesn't mean they interest me the most.
That's very true. Mike could care less what I think sometimes.
No, not necessarily. I'm just saying we have different interests.
You know, I am
There's
interested
different things that guests say that you are intrigued by and things that guests say that I'm more intrigued by.
You know what I am intrigued by? Who won those Flyers tickets?
Glad you reminded me. Ken Jones, Kevin Lawson, Eric Levy, and Paul Lewis. Townless, cityless, but they are the people. Congratulations to those people. They were the first 4 in. They got themselves 4-pack of tickets to the Flyers. Sal Pal Antonio was on, said this.
They don't want to take shortcuts, meaning build from the inside out, stay to the core values that they had when they drafted Fletcher Cox, they drafted Payne Johnson, they drafted Brandon Graham, they drafted Jason Kelsey, who are the cornerstones of the trenches of the football team.
Build from the inside. Sounds like the core values are offensive line, defensive line.
Yeah, and I think that for all the people who complain about how he's not a football guy, that kind of sounds like a football guy to me.
I laugh at that all the time. It's because he gets his hands dirty and takes linemen. Football guy.
Doesn't sound like a very analytics guy to me.
No. Well, the analytics would say, yeah, build from the inside, build from the line out.
Well, maybe if you find the right analytics to support your argument.
Sal Pal, can the Eagles compete now?
The feeling that I get in talking to people on background in NovaCare is that they feel like they can compete in the division this year, that they're not that far away. And, you know, truth be told, won 4 games. The Washington football team won 7 and won the division. So there's a difference of 3 games.
So the people in the building agree with me. They can compete now.
And by the way, this is not a new concept. In the NFL, teams go from worst to first almost every single stinking year. So this idea that, the Eagles are so far away, but we say that every year, and yet there's a team that makes the postseason and gets to the second round that you're like, I didn't expect that team to get there.
People compartmentalize year to year and think that because this is who you were one year, that's who you are the next. Nothing carries over, especially in football. Yeah, in basketball, you're not going to go from the 14 seed to the 1 seed. In football, whatever you were in 2020 is written off and changed, especially with the new staff.
And especially when that team had a ton of injuries the year before.
Well, that's the thing in football, because the injuries change the game so much.
Yes.
You don't have the impact of injuries in other sports. Like you might see a team in the NBA go from the 1 seed to the 4 seed because they had injury issues. They're not going to go from the 1 seed to, or they're not going to go from the 4 seed to the 14th. I mean, unless you lose LeBron James all season long.
Right. Completely different.
Sal Pal, give me a stat on Wentz.
Carson Wentz was off target throwing the football 24%. That was the most of any starting quarterback in the National Football League last year. Worse than Dwayne Haskins.
Jeez.
Worse than Drew Lock. Worse than Mitchell Trubisky. Worse than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was at 17%. Worse than Daniel Jones.
That was some bad quarterbacks that he just listed there. Wentz was the worst. He missed on 24%. I said it all year. Just simply the inaccuracy problems were just eye-opening.
Yeah, and I love what Sal says. Look, man, this is how bad he was. Like, people don't fully want to grasp or accept how bad the quarterback was at times last year. I said the entire year, I was screaming about it on game night, and I'll never let go of this. Carson Wentz alone lost you 4 games last year that you could have won.
I agree.
You could have won them, but you didn't because the quarterback was playing so bad.
How many times did I say you simply lost because the quarterback was so bad?
It's amazing that people still have to be reminded about that. Like, think about it. Sal just said earlier, you were a 3-game difference with Washington. If you get those 4 games back, one of them being against Washington week 1, maybe you win the division.
Right.
And maybe Doug Peterson doesn't get fired. And maybe we don't have half the conversation.
Well, by the way,
and
they did win a game against the Saints when they changed quarterbacks. Now, you could say, well, they lost the 3 games after that. The point was they had a bad roster with injuries, and they still got competent enough quarterback play to win a football game.
Yes.
All right, Ben Simmons is out tomorrow, by the way.
Yes, he's not on the road trip at all.
But it's already been announced that he is not going to play. So he is out tomorrow. Paul Hudrick talked a little bit about losing because they haven't had Ben Simmons. It's been a problem. So how big of a problem has it been? We've got
Doc's honest last time. Doc said the reason he didn't want Joel Embiid on Giannis Antetokounmpo from the start is just the situation, the back-to-back, and how worn out Joel Embiid probably already was. Well, if you have Ben Simmons, that's not as big of a concern. Ben Simmons did a really nice job against Giannis last time for 3 quarters, and I thought he kind of ran out of gas because they were on a back-to-back that night too. So it just seems to keep happening with the Bucks. So I would say it's, of course, like you want to win every game, like you never want to lose. But I think if you went into this game expecting them to come out on fire and pull off this win, I think you were just kind of setting yourself up for disappointment.
So no Ben Simmons again. So those of you out there that kind of are anticipating him back and wanting to see the Sixers at full strength against the Bucks, you're not going to get that.
Right. And I think it's better off that you don't take any risks. You know, this is a point in the season where you...
Yeah, but okay, is this an important enough game, though? The number 1 seed, if you lose this game, they're going to be a half game behind you.
What's more important, winning the game or making sure the guy that's not doing well is ready down the stretch?
Well, if he's sick, he's sick. I mean, there's nothing you can do there.
Right.
All right, Sports Bash Live. I got another Sports Bash Cash code word coming up for you. It's worth $1,000. Congratulations to our Flyers ticket winners. Great show today. Thanks to my guests, Sal Pal, Antonio, Paul Hudrick, Andrew DiCecco, Bob Wankel, the PT, and Jeff Kerr. Jeff Kerr is great, by the way. I really enjoy the back and forth that we have. Hey, if you want to watch any of the Coaches versus Cancer baseball games, they're on our website, 973ESPN.com, all weekend long. There's another game tonight, and then 4 games on Saturday and Sunday starting at 9 o'clock. Josh Henning has game night up next. Kevin Durso joins him at 6:20. I'm back on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hey, coming up on Monday, it is draft week, everybody. Yes, we're going to get into the NFL draft aplenty. Football at 4. Jeff Mosher joins us at 4 o'clock. The Phillies weekend, the Sixers weekend, and more. It's all coming up on a big Monday show. Draft week is here.